Well, welcome today to the 11th Annual Kern County Energy Summit. Thank you for waking up bright and early. And before I get, thank you. Hey, early risers over there. Hopefully the coffee's strong. So I'd like if you could join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, you're joining us on a special occasion to our 11th Annual Energy Summit. I'm not sure if that means you have to paper. Is that what's appropriate for 11th Annual Anniversary? Coincidentally, 2 days ago was my 11th anniversary at the Kern EDC, so I really appreciate your continued support. And we'll talk about our staff here, but Cheryl's been here 12 years and Melinda 13. So combined, we're actually older than a millennial, maybe a baby boomer. Today is going to be a testament of Kern County's incredible economic vitality. The energy sector really is one of the legs of the stool that drives our region. And when you look at some of our top rankings, key to that is the energy's creativity, innovation, and development. We talk about our STEM jobs. We're number 4 for STEM in the country. And hopefully you know what that acronym means, or STEAM, science, technology, engineering, math. We're number 1 in upward mobility. We talk about this because I think that's key, that American dream, moving from the bottom 20% to the top. Kern County is number 1 in the country. Engineering, number 9. This just came out last week. I'm not sure if it's relevant to energy, but we're the number 3 Halloween city in the country. Not sure. Apparently we have more trick-or-treaters per capita than anywhere in the country. If you've been to Hagen Oaks recently, I drive around and my wife and daughter go out, and I refuse to leave the car. Not to go off on a tangent, but my daughter's birthday is on Halloween, so I tell her to tell people so she gets more candy. So maybe a trick for your kids. We're focused today on all types of energy. We're obviously the number 2 oil production county in the country. We're right behind McKenzie County in North Dakota. Number 2, pretty impressive. I believe we're at about 387,000 barrels a day of production. Our power in terms of the state, it's 70% of oil in the state comes from Kern County. So we always say we power the country, we defend the country, and we feed the country. Kind of those legs of the stool. So I think as you hear the stories today, we have about our significant petroleum industry, renewable energy, wind, solar, the nation's largest wind and solar farm. This is something that we have the portfolio today we're going to talk about that would be something suitable for a state or a country. And this is in Kern County. And it really comes together because of that public-private coalition. Our first speaker has actually been one of the architects of both the oil and gas EIR, as well as with the renewable energy, incredible $30 billion of capital investment in renewable energy. And since 2011, when the Board of Supervisors set the goal of 10,000 megawatts, we actually have, I believe, 12,000. So we're really helping the state on that fueling, right? Powering and fueling the state. So I'm excited as we move through the morning to hear the stories about how we are, in many ways, the center of innovation. So I wanted to bring to the stage Craig Murphy, and he's going to tell you the story of how the Planning and Natural Resources Department affected this change, working with the Board of Supervisors and creating investment into Kern County. Craig Murphy.
All right, thank you, Richard, for that introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. As I see all of the names that are on the tables, I would venture to guess that there's not one agency, organization, or company in this room that I have not had the opportunity to work on a project for. I get asked all the time, what do I do for a living? At first glance, you would think that that would be easy to describe what a land use planner does. But it's a lot more difficult than you might think. Impossible if you're trying to describe it in only a few sentences. This is especially the case if the person you're talking to doesn't understand how projects are permitted in California or is unfamiliar with Kern County. So my first job out of college was for the city of San Jose as a policy analyst for a city council member. I distinctly remember thinking at the time, why would anybody ever want to work for a county? There's never anything to do. Then, of course, I came to Kern. Speaking of, I would not be in Kern County today if it were not for energy production. Better yet, I would not even live in California. My family moved to California from Colorado in 1997 when my father took a job with one of our local oil-producing companies. My family is a great example of the indirect benefits that this region and that this state receive as a result of the efforts of every single person in this room. I attended and earned my degree from California State University School. I've had the pleasure of working for local government ever since for a number of different cities and jurisdictions. My brother earned his PhD from UCLA. For a time, he worked for LA County Public Health. And my sister attended and graduated at California University. Has been a high school teacher for schools in Kern, San Luis Obispo, and Riverside counties. All three of us have been active, productive members of our community. And again, we would not be here if it wasn't not for energy production. My point is, the exponential indirect benefits that result from California's energy production links all of our citizens together. They continually build upon themselves from person to person to the point that they really become immeasurable. As Richard had said, today marks the 11th annual Kern County Energy Summit. Our county has a long and successful history of energy production, so much so that it is embedded in the fabric of our communities. For the past 12 years, I've worked for the county of Kern. During that time, my department has changed its name on 3 separate occasions. When I first started working for the department, we were simply known as the Planning Department. After a couple years, we became the Planning and Community Development Department. More recently, we are now known as the Planning and Natural Resources Department. The inclusion of natural resources in the department's name is more than symbolic. I look at it as a commitment. Over the past few years, we've been able to accomplish many of our energy goals that we have set out to achieve together. We now have permitted over 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy. Our solar and wind facilities are some of the largest in the world. Energy storage and waste-to-energy projects will soon become standard instead of unique. And perhaps the most challenging permitting environment ever, we were able to complete the processing of a new oil and gas ordinance. Just a few months ago, we received the 2017 Challenge Merit Award from CSAC, the California State Association of Counties, for our electronic-based permitting system for energy projects that was established specifically to implement that oil and gas ordinance. Since its adoption, we've been able to issue over 2,600 permits through that system. From a purely staff perspective, I have a theory as to why the county has seen such great success in this industry over the past few years. However, to best explain this theory of mine, I need to tell you a personal story. For those of you who know me know that I've been a soccer player my entire life. Started playing when I was a child. I played through high school and in college at San Jose State. I continue to play and coach weekly in Bakersfield as part of the youth and adult leagues that we can find around this town. I've always considered my soccer career to be rather successful. I remember one practice, however, growing up. I was about 10 years old. We were working on trying to score off of a corner kick. My coach called me over. He said, when you're in the game, right before we take our corner kick, I want you to elbow the kid, you're guarding you, right in the gut. Nobody will know. The kid will be surprised. He'll go down. He'll be wide open for the goal. So, of course, the next game, the opportunity presented itself. I was being guarded by a kid. He was blonde. I mean, this is how vividly I remember this still. He was wearing a red and white jersey. I did exactly what I was told. Right before the kick, just gave a little elbow, right in the stomach. He, of course, went down. Ball sailed right over my head. No scoring opportunity. Now, the kid immediately came up to me afterward, and he asked, why did you do that? I ignored him and continued to play. Now, in all of my years of playing, I never, ever felt as bad as I did after that game. That single play has and has continued to be a defining moment in my life. Why? Well, it's because from that moment on, I knew exactly what kind of soccer player I was never, ever going to be. By knowing what you are not, you eliminate half the things that you need to worry about. This allows you to better focus on the things you want to become and the things that really deserve your attention. That is my theory as to why the County of Kern has been so successful when it comes to energy production. The competitive advantage in Kern County is that from a permitting and processing perspective, we have a good understanding who we are not, and we have a good understanding who we do not want to become. We're not going to operate as an agency that is difficult to communicate with, difficult to meet with, or difficult to get answers from. We are not going to let other agencies, we're not going to let other jurisdictions decide what is best for our communities or for our citizens. And we are not going to shortcut any appropriate environmental review or necessary mitigation to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. These are just a few of the examples of the subtle differences that I have noticed while working for this county. Those differences have served as the foundation by which all of our success has been built on. So those of you who know me also know that I'm a very visual person, and I prepared for you a representation of how the permitting process works. All right, I have this blue paper. This blue paper represents a project when it's first presented to me, my staff, to the County of Kern. Blue, small, that's what it is. This orange paper represents the project about halfway through the permitting process. It's always bigger than when it was first presented to staff, and in this case, it's even a different color. It would be hard-pressed to think of a single project in which I didn't receive the phone call, and many of you in this room have made the phone call. For those of you who are unaware, the phone call always starts out something like this. Hey, Craig, how's it going? So, what would happen if we slightly wanted to change our project? Finally, this somewhat smaller orange paper with stars represents the project in its final shape as it's being for its final consideration. Now, I joke about the phone call, but it is a real thing. It can paralyze the processing of a project if you let it, and I'm sure that you have stories of how this has happened to projects that you have been working on. If you think about it, the complexities of permitting and executing a project in California are mind-blowing. You need approval from upwards up to 1, 2, 10, maybe 15 agencies that have to give some sort of approval to let your project move forward or to operate. Design, it has to be efficient. You have to be able to build it. You have to have the parts to be able to maintain it, the infrastructure to get those parts to and from. When it comes to energy permitting, land ownership, funding, selling of your product, the energy output, you have to deal with hundreds upon thousands of different individuals. Adaptability. Can this project adapt to the changing demands of our state? It's no wonder that it always has to constantly change when you have to factor all of those things. Again, I'm not telling anybody in this room anything that you don't already know. What I am saying, however, is that in Kern County, those changes are somewhat anticipated, they are expected, and many times they are necessary to effectively process a project. At the end of the day, I am a land use planner, and the number one question I have to understand is, do these changes fundamentally change the underlying impacts of the project or its compatibility with the surrounding uses? If not, then we simply adjust and move forward. If so, then again, the answer is the same. We simply adjust, we address those impacts, and then again, we move forward. Knowing who you are not allows more freedom to concentrate on those aspects of a project that you can control. So in closing, I want to leave you with one more personal story. Relatives cannot visit my family without my father taking them out to the bluffs overlooking the oil fields. It's kind of like one of those required Murphy family field trips. When I am driving home from eastern Kern County, my children always ask me to take a detour along Oak Creek Road, Roseman Boulevard, or Bacchus Road because they want to see the solar fields and the wind turbines up close. The impact your industry has on the community and the state is more than what you bring or what you offer in energy production or property taxes. I would argue that it's the bedrock by which all industries are built on. What we can accomplish together is not only impressive, but I believe it is equally inspiring, and I am very proud to have been a small part of that overall success. Thank you.
I want to introduce Vibhu Kaushik. It's exciting to hear what he's talking about in terms of energy storage. Up until, I believe, a year ago or in the last 6 months, Tehachapi had the largest energy storage project in the country, or North America. Recently, I guess we're number 2 in Ontario. He's going to talk about I believe it's the Mira Loma generating station. Say that quickly. The key is to obviously store the renewable energy for future use. And so he's going to talk about the science and technology behind that, because we typically refer to the Tehachapi Energy Storage Project as well as the Transmission Project. Vibhu has a very eclectic background coming from Manitoba, so I'm sure he will regale us with stories of living in Manitoba, working with the hydropower system, as well as his mechanical engineering background. And just to let you know, Southern California Edison serves 14 million people over 50,000 square miles. So without further ado, please welcome Vibhu to the stage.
You can already see I'm a little bit taller than Richard. Morning, everyone. So exciting to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Richard, for the gracious introduction. Powering the future seems to be the theme here, and innovations in energy and growth and where our state is going with our success in our energy story, both in renewables and conventionals, is part of what I'll share today. But really, my presentation will focus mostly on our recently completed energy storage projects. And to get to that, first I'd like to start with just some of the recent California energy trends and recent events that happened that formed the foundation for these projects before getting into the projects, and then share some of the success stories we had in past year in utility scale energy storage. As Richard said, the story really started here in the Kern County about 5 years ago when we built the world's largest energy storage project, the Tehachapi battery storage project, 8 megawatt, 32 megawatt hours, got a lot of attention, and made news everywhere as battery storage became a part of energy mix at that time. People started looking at battery storage as a megawatt size, as a utility scale resource. That story just continues, innovation continues, and Southern California Edison really sees renewables combined with the batteries as a resource of the future. A lot of that development happening here in Kern County. So getting into the California's energy trend, here's a graph. I'm an engineer, I have to show you a graph, just to go with the theme here. But here's a trend showing our recent renewable portfolio. And as you see, the yellow portion there is really the solar build-out that has happened over the past 4 to 5 years. Before that, it was mostly a wind story, if you look at last 5 to 8 years. And you have geothermals and small hydro and a bunch of other renewables adding up to our renewable portfolio supply of about 29% in California as of 2016. We are ahead of our target of hitting 33% renewables by 2020, and now with the target of 50% renewables by 2030. This is really driven by state's policy of clean air and greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030, and then even more aggressive, 80% below 1990 GHG emissions level by 2050. What renewables now calls for is, because wind and solar is intermittent renewable energy, the sun may be shining and you may have monsoon cloud, the generation may drop quickly and pick up again. Same thing, the wind could stop blowing and pick up again very quickly. It requires a need for flexible generation from rest of the portfolio. So one of the things that my team has been working on in Edison is increase the flexibility, fast ramping, quick start, deployable, dispatchable generation through our conventional portfolio to enable higher integration and higher penetration of renewable resources in our grid. So this is the California's CAISO's famous duck curve. How many people here have seen it? Few of you, many of you. This has really become world famous. I think we were the ones who invented it, and now every conference I go to, whether I'm in California, East Coast, Center, I was in Korea a couple months ago, Sydney in July, and people talk about California's duck curve and all different euphemisms. So this is what it is. And it's really, as we go into the future, every year from 2013 to 15, you see the history, and the future down to 2020, you see that big solar generation happening in the middle of the day would really drop in the evening hours somewhere between 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., depending on the time of the year. And as the huge solar generation, tens of thousands of megawatt is dropping, the load is peaking in the evening. That's really when the net load is now becoming maximum during the day. So the peak is not really 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. the way it used to be, but in future, the net peak load net of renewables will be more later in the later part of the day at 20 and 2100 hours. And so the problem here is really the fast ramp, the neck of the duck that you see here with about 12 gigawatts of ramp in about 3 to 4 hours. And that, again, calls for flexible resources. It calls for energy storage, which could be charged when there is excess energy on the grid and provide the energy when it's needed. So a couple other events that happened last year. We had in Southern California a leakage at the Aliso Canyon Natural Gas Storage Facility, which caused partial shutdown of that facility. Natural gas generation is still marginal. It's a major part of our energy supply mix in California and in Southern California. And what that caused is it created an electric reliability problem in the Southern California power grid, including Kern County. So basically, as we like to call it, the south of Path 15 within the electric grid. The fundamental here is this. Electricity travels at the speed of light, and we as electric utilities and system operators like to balance demand and supply perfectly in real time, every second of the day, 24 hours of the day, 365 days of the year. And so we have to make sure we are generating the right amount of electricity to balance the demand, to keep the frequency at 60 cycles and voltage at the right level so that all the appliances and customers are happy. Because so much of the portfolio is powered by natural gas, and gas does not travel at speed of light. Gas travels at about 30 to 40 miles an hour, and it comes from the Gulf states. It takes almost a day, more than 24 hours for natural gas to come to Southern California. We need to know exactly how much natural gas we'll need a day in advance. And if we are off in that number because the load came a little higher, maybe it was hotter than expected, or the renewables dropped unexpectedly in an hour, we need to store or withdraw some of that natural gas. And that's really what Aliso Canyon provided. It was a huge storage and withdrawal facility. But because of that unfortunate incident and the partial unavailability or partial availability of Aliso Canyon, we were asked by the state to expedite some battery storage projects in Southern California. So on January 6th, Governor Brown issued an executive order declaring this as a situation of emergency. And to address that, the California Public Utilities Commission passed the Emergency Resolution 4791, asking SC to hold expedited both a competitive RFP and an RFO for third-party and utility-owned storage projects to address some of that reliability concerns in Southern California and enhance the reliability. The storage obviously could provide some of that flexibility by the battery-powered resources. So we'll get into those projects and what we did in response to these moment of crisis, or as I see as moment of opportunity that was presented to us. I'm not going to get into detail here, but this is really the SC service territory before I get into the projects. So 50,000 square miles, 430 cities and communities, about 15 million residents. And if you look at the Kern County, we are split right in the middle. SC serves the eastern part of the Kern County in that map, and our sister utility, PG&E, there were a few of them on the dinner table last night. They serve the western part of the Kern County. We like to consider ourselves as industry leaders in innovation, which is really the theme here, as well as storage and renewable energy, smart grid, many other areas. So in energy storage, this is cumulatively what SCE has done till date. If you look at our big activities, it adds up to more than 400 megawatts. And that's huge if you look across the country or other utilities. But it goes back to our 2014 when we had our first big LCR RFO after the shutdown of Song's nuclear power plant. We procured about 260 megawatts of storage. That really came in as a surprise to a lot of people because our mandate wasn't that high. And the expectation was that storage would be uneconomic and we would not procure that much. But the market proved otherwise. The bids came so competitive that storage started to become a real part of the energy mix. That story continued in our energy storage RFOs and most recently the Aliso Canyon Energy Storage RFO, ACES, which is the projects that I will talk about. But all of these projects are really after where it started with the Tehachapi Renewable Transmission, the Tehachapi Battery Storage project that I talked about. So getting into the project, the one that Richard was talking about, this is at SC's Mira Loma Tesla battery storage system. It's built at the Mira Loma substation, which is at the terminus of the Tehachapi transmission lines, the high voltage transmission lines that carry a lot of wind power from the Tehachapi Desert to the load center in Southern California. This was huge. This was built in record period of time in partnership with Tesla within a period of less than 4 months. From design to construction, permitting, all inclusive. And at that time, it was the world's largest, I would still like to call it world's largest, and that number keeps on getting updated, but it's still one of the world's largest battery storage project built at the Mira Loma substation in Southern California. Again, it was built in response to the Aliso Canyon emergency resolution and came online before the target date of December 31st. Considering that the resolution was really passed in May and the contract was awarded to Tesla in September. So this was one big success story we had last year. The other big success story I want to share is a project that my team led in creating world's first hybrid power plant. What we did was we combined a conventional natural gas turbine with a utility scale battery. Quite similar to if some of you drive hybrid cars or you're aware of the Toyota Prius came up with the batteries along with the gasoline engines. So the battery really provides the initial pickup in a Prius and gets you going. Then the gas engine kicks in, and when you apply the brakes, the energy regenerates back into the battery. So something similar happens here. The battery provides the instantaneous response to the grid without any delay while the gas turbine could come online. And then the gas turbine charges the battery back. The reason this was so huge is this is a very different way of thinking at energy storage. This is not just a conventional huge battery that could be put in any substation or any and connected to the grid anywhere to really charge when there's excess energy and discharge back to the grid when it's needed. This was integrated with existing gas-fired power plants, and there is thousands of these power plants all across the world. This provided not only economic value, this was a net present value positive project for energy storage. So that was huge, that battery projects could be economic. But also it had a really good environmental story. It reduced the greenhouse gas emissions from these power plants by 60%. It reduced the water consumption at these plants by more than 2 million gallons a year, and really was very well received in the industry. So basically led in partnership with General Electric and Wellhead Energy Solutions. This schematic really, I don't know if it does the justice, but there's a gas turbine in the back and a battery power pack in the front showing you how the hybrid power plant works. This is the real story. This is at one of our 2 peaker plants, as we like to call them. Peaker is the LM6000 gas turbine in the back, the big gray chimney that you see in the picture. That was the existing gas-fired power plant. And in the front, the white boxes that you see are really the battery energy storage. So I don't know if this laser pointer will go all the way. It kind of does. So that's the new battery storage project with inverters around it, the switch gears, and the peaker power plant is right here in the back. To this grid operator, all of this appears as one resource. It's one hybrid power plant, which has a huge battery and a gas turbine. And this was really the first of a kind in the world that also came online before December 31st last year to provide some of that flexibility need and fast response, energy storage that was needed to enhance the electric reliability of our system in Southern California in response to Aliso Canyon. So continuing here, the reason this was so valuable and the economic side of it, why this penciled out positive, is because it provided increased ancillary services benefits, so frequency regulation, spinning reserves. The spinning reserves are very valuable for the electric grid to maintain the reliability of electric grid. In case there is contingencies on the system, then these resources can come quickly online and provide some of that much needed capacity. It provided more optimal dispatch of the entire power generation portfolio. So what it did was these peaker plants are utilized typically less than 10% of the time. Imagine assets built with tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars and with such low utilization factor. Just doesn't make business sense to anyone, right? And what this changed is adding a battery and hybridizing these power plants made them valuable more than 90% of the time instead of less than 10% of the time. So the revenue stream drastically changed without burning any natural gas. And that's really the reason why they penciled out economic and makes business sense. Some things we'll probably get to see more in future. And I realize there's quite a few of these gas-fired power plants in Kern County right here as well. So this story may continue, and there will be more examples in the future. So just continuing here, again, this shows the before and after. On your right is what this plant used to be able to do before, and on the left is what it does now. Different colors, different market products, much more value. That's really the story here. Higher capacity utilization, lower fuel gas usage, lower emissions, higher market revenues. Really, this is the last slide. And this shows some of our industry recognition and accolades. So a quotation by President of California ISO, who is the electric grid operator, acknowledging the success of this project as a perfect partnerships in DERs and innovative ways that shows that we can still fully participate in wholesale energy markets managed by the ISO. So we also were on a little bit of a tour here collecting hardware. Edison Electric Institute recognized this as with their top honor as EEI's Thomas Edison Innovation Award back in Boston in May. And that story continued to San Diego with Energy Storage North America Innovation Award. Even our regulator, South Coast Air Quality Management District, how neat is that to get an award from the regulator who regulates you for clean air? For the first time in history, as far as I know, a power plant getting an award from Air Quality Management District. Anyways, that was amazing, I thought, just a couple months ago, and the story continues. So, anyways, look, a lot happened in the electric grid. A lot is happening. We are committed to the resource of the future, which again I see as renewables plus storage and really flexible conventional resources as we modernize our electric grid with our grid modernization program with innovative technologies. Having projects like these which could bring such innovation and making storage part of energy mix now. It's not future. It's not saying that wait 10 more years and let cost to be drops and then batteries will be economic. These projects show that story is here today, that energy storage is part of economic development today, that it could be added with conventional power plants, that it could be built very quickly within 3 to 4 months from design, construction, permitting, and bring online to meet the needs of the grid. So happy to share some of that, and I'll be around if there are any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vibhu. Actually, speaking of awards, in our program, we received an International EDC Award for our market overview. So we're really proud using a local Marcom to help us market what you're hearing today, as well as our other industries. So I think that's really critical as we talk to folks about being an ambassador for Kern County. Again, we can't let down our guard, and we have to be vigilant, especially when we're in places like LA or San Francisco to talk about again, what we're doing to help the state achieve its goals in terms of job creation and mobility. So I'm excited in the next group to have a, in terms of innovation, energy development, we're going to have a Hele Peterson and Alan Fuchs. And this is a great story of collaboration and in terms of what we're doing in the Valley. And if you've ever been up to Fresno to the Water Energy Technology Incubator or Center, the WET Center, they've done an incredible job of bringing in not just public sector money from federal and state grants, but also innovation, 20 companies working at the WET Center, testing facilities. As part of our new recently launched initiative, Advanced Kern, we recently took a field trip up to Fresno, not just to see the WET Center, but also the Bitwise, and showing that innovation exists around us. We have it in our own county, frankly. You hear some of the stories today. We have it in significant amount, but how do we commercialize? How do we create this tech transfer? And Cal State recently announced a proposed energy research center, 55,000 square feet. We have the research, we have the innovation, but again, how do we create this ecosystem of technology development? So Al, let's see, I'll start with Alan, okay? Can I start with are you speaking before? Okay. So Alan, you may not know it from his accent, but he's from New York by way of Reno. And apparently people have locked out their Facebook accounts. When I try to find things about them that are not on their bio, when I looked up Alan, I saw the picture of Einstein sticking out his tongue, but it didn't look like Alan. Was that your profile? I'm not sure. But I did find that in terms of your LinkedIn, okay, it's not Facebook, but found that you founded 2 biomedical companies and chemical engineering background. And I was fascinated, and I saw that he actually authored a publication called Mechanical Disruption of Tumors by Iron Particles and Magnetic Field Application. That's about as far as I got in reading it. So he can tell you what it is. And he does have 1 patent for magneto magenta, fluid, encased, and flexible materials. I mean, this is really, page-turning stuff. But we're so excited to bring his expertise to our county. And actually, our East Kern group's meeting tomorrow in Boron. We're going to have a road trip out there. I'm not sure if he'll regret that, but it should be a great conversation. So without further ado, Alan Fuchs, if you can come up and tell your story.
Thank you, Richard. I relocated 3 months ago as the new director of our Energy Center at Cal State University, Bakersfield, and it's been a pleasure to meet with many of you at a very exciting time. I feel that it's a very dynamic period right now in terms of the energy landscape, and so I'm very delighted to be here. What I'd like to do today for the next few minutes is tell you a little bit about activities that are ongoing in our Energy Center and at Cal State. And there are actually already a fair number of activities going on. And so one of my roles is going to be to disseminate information about the activities going on in energy at the university, and also tell you about the activities that we're planning moving forward. So let me start with a little bit of information on our strategic vision. Our strategic vision starts with petroleum and really includes the larger energy landscape. I've been very delighted to meet people from a number of renewable energy companies here the last couple of days, and I'm very excited to see how much activity is going on in the energy domain. I also have experience and a great deal of interest at the energy, water, and agriculture interface. And so that's really, at this stage, I would say that's the theme of our center. And I'll tell you a little bit about the history of our center. The center really sort of had its origins about 7 years ago when the university, specifically our geology department, received a grant from NSF called the CREST grant for research in science and technology. And that grant was focused on the nexus between energy, water, and agriculture. So that's really sort of been the theme of the last 7 years. 2 years ago, the university got a Phase 2 grant, which will take us for another 3 years now, related to a similar theme. Other themes that I see coming from our center relate to new materials, the environment, biotechnology, computing, and education. So that's a mouthful. Let me tell you a little bit about our vision for the center. We expect to be a top energy center in the state in 5 years, and we believe that we'll be a nationally recognized center in 10 to 15 years. And our mission includes areas related to developing people who will be involved in leadership positions in industry, government, and students who will go on to graduate school. So I mentioned the nexus between energy, water, and agriculture. I looked last night online and found that the price of Brent crude is $64 now. It's gone up $15 since I got here in the middle of August. And so that's interesting, and I look forward to having discussions with people in the oil industry to understand the impact of that. One of our goals is to develop new teaching and research facilities, and for that reason, we're planning an Energy and Engineering Innovation Center. I should mention that this month, 3 engineering programs are coming up for ABET accreditation. I'm very excited to be here and to be part of that. This will be my 4th accreditation visit that I have participated in, 3 of them at the University of Nevada, Reno. We're neighbors. And I'm very excited that computer engineering, electrical engineering, and engineering science are all the 3 engineering programs that are coming up for accreditation this month. They should be accredited this summer. We also are working with faculty that we hope will be involved in professional leadership roles. And we will be making strong outreach to state and local leadership and local companies in Kern County. Here are some statistics about our center, and in talking to people, I've discovered that pretty widely a lot of this information is not known. So as I said, I see one of my roles is to disseminate this information. The center was started in the School of Natural Sciences, Math, and Engineering, which contains 7 departments. There are already 64 faculty in the school, and in the last 10 years, we brought in $24 million in grant funding. I'd like to show the next few slides that really relate to the composition of the Energy Center, the existing composition, and the programs that related to its development. So the Geology Department was really the one responsible for getting the center up and running 7 years ago, and they received credit for having the most seals here. We have 3 seals related to our Geology Department. They received the first phase of the CREST grant 7 years ago, and it will be overall a $10.5 million grant over 10 years, in addition $2.5 million in other grants. And some of the focal areas that geology brings to our Energy Center relate to petroleum geology, information systems, hydrogeology, geochemical modeling. Work has been done and will continue to be done on oil reservoir and source rock, hazard assessment, and biochemistry. And you can see on the bottom, and I have it smaller, but I'd be happy to get information to anyone who's interested on the specific faculty who are involved. I have a list of the 5 faculty in the department who are involved with the Energy Research Center. I should mention that the 2 departments that have active graduate programs are geology and biology. And so having graduate students puts them in a position to do very cutting-edge research. And I've started working with both of these departments where I hope that we're going to be able to. So one of my visions for the center is that we're going to put together teams of faculty and students to address complex problems that are beyond the level that a single investigator has been able to work on. So for example, single investigators have worked on carbon dioxide sequestration and produced water, and I hope to put together teams of faculty, students, and local companies to work on problems that are like that or more complex. In the biology area, they've worked on biofuels, genomics, genetics, plant biology, ecology, and microbial, with a list of faculty on the bottom. The picture shown there is a CT scanner that's used for studying the root properties of plants, and I believe that we're one of the 3 biology programs in the country that's using CT scanner, advanced technology, to study the uptake of water in plant roots. Chemistry and biochemistry has faculty that are working on photochemical cells and solar, biohybridized, dye-sensitized solar cells, and photoelectrochemical cells. Our mathematics department also is involved in areas related to energy. So, for example, they've looked at uncertainty analysis related to well placement and areas related to the Sierra snowpack. And I should mention that faculty in our mathematics department has approached me, several of them, because of their interest in electric vehicles. So that's an area that I'll be continuing to talk with them. An emerging area of computer engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science is very exciting. And many of you have heard the terms that I'm going to refer to and know that these are emerging areas. So, for example, big data, artificial intelligence, power grid, power systems, cybersecurity, energy efficiency. These are all areas that I see hugely contributing to our center. The picture on the right is a very high-performance simulator that one of our faculty in electrical engineering received and allows us to simulate very complex systems in terms of their energy usage and performance. A couple of additional areas in electrical computer engineering are image processing, smart control of pumping systems, and again, big data analysis. Almost every faculty in the computer engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science field have indicated interest to me in working related to the Energy Center. So I'm very excited about that. Physics and engineering have worked on produced water and the treatment of that for potential reuse in the agriculture area. Area that I've worked on are fuel cells. People have worked on well pipeline thermodynamics, heat transfer, and engineering education projects as well. And I should mention the previous speaker really, I think, highlighted and my vision for the center actually is growing and maturing here, and areas that to me are very exciting when I see the different areas of energy. I think that storage is one that is going to grow, and it's going to become even more a major dominating area, as well as energy efficiency. Other areas that relate to emerging technologies, such as quantum dots, semiconductor processing. These are other areas that I think that the center will be involved with, and the department faculty are listed there, and I'm listed in that group and on the engineering side. Okay, let me mention just a couple of other areas that I think the center will be involved in. I see us as going well beyond research and technology into areas related to economic development. And so it's been a pleasure for me to get to know people in the community who are working on the business side and economic development side. I have worked with and started up companies myself. I've worked on invention disclosures, and I think that's a culture that it's an important one to build here. And we'll be working on studying energy economics and policy. We're going to be reaching out very strongly to alumni and looking at local companies for corporate support. For example, scholarships and fellowships, and ultimately even possibly endowed faculty positions. An area that I think is very important is connecting our local developments nationally and globally. So the way we're going to do this is by developing state-of-the-art undergraduate curriculum. I'm going to be teaching a class next semester on research problems for undergraduate students. It's going to be a small class, so I can spend a lot of time with the students, and I'm very excited about learning about new areas. So if any of you have ideas, I'm looking at areas related to water and as it relates to energy, and I'd love to learn about other potential areas that we can work with local industry. We will be developing internationally competitive graduate programs. We'll be doing outreach, and we will be exposing our students to global experiences. And another area that I think is very important, and I think will be even increasing in the importance, Richard mentioned our visit to Fresno and visiting the incubator. This is a good tie-in to the next talk, which relates to an incubator that we visited in Fresno, and working with faculty and students on developing new intellectual property. And my last thing that I'm going to mention here is that I'm a member of the Operating Council, the Career and Education Operating Council at the American Institute of Chemical Engineering. And the new trend that I'm seeing is DOE is putting together these $140 million centers. There are two of them, one of them being run by chemical engineers that's called RAPID, about process intensification, another one out of Texas A&M that's called a Smart Manufacturing Center. And these are huge mega projects. And I've been starting to look at becoming involved with these, and there are a number of them around the country. So that's what I see as the future, is these mega DOE-type centers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. Maybe you can read the publication to me tomorrow on the drive to Boron. You know, Alan really hit on the themes of innovation and technology, and one of the metrics we look at is patents per capita, and unfortunately we don't do as well as the potential, but however, we were recently rated in the top 10 for high-tech GDP growth. And so one of our main themes is take a closer look, and we need to all do that, and not just Cal State. You see at Taft College, Bakersfield College, Saracosa, the innovation and research that's occurring there. Again, I mentioned East Kern. You see China Lake, Edwards, Mojave, and so as we work that tapestry of economic development innovation, as I always say, we have the ingredients, so will the souffle rise? And so that's what we're working on. I wanted to bring up Haley Peterson, who they are definitely a best practice in terms of what she's been able and her team accomplished. And she, MBA from Fresno, but got her undergrad, I believe, Technical University of Denmark. And that's one of the places, Copenhagen, I want to visit next. So you may not know that Denmark is the top country in the world for percentage of wind power. 41% of the power is generated from wind. So I just found that out on Wikipedia, so thank you for your contribution. Haley Peterson.
Good morning, and thank you, Richard, for the introduction and for giving me the opportunity to share with you today a little bit about the Blue Tech Valley, an initiative we are working on out of Fresno State, together with a range of partners throughout California. So in 2016, the California Energy Commission launched a program where they wanted to create a California innovation ecosystem for energy innovations. And they did so by creating a statewide network that would help entrepreneurs cross the valley of death in their path to get their technology from their idea to actually being a business. So why were they interested in creating this energy system? Well, they thought that, some of the barriers that are the same for all the entrepreneurs, actually, I was going to see if this one is this one, sorry. What they really wanted to do with this ecosystem that they created was to alleviate some of the barriers that entrepreneurs today face when they're trying to get their technology from idea and out to the market. And the overarching goal was really to create some better opportunities and benefit for the California ratepayers. So how could they really get some of these technologies that innovators have in the hands of the ratepayer, either if it's technology or services? It could be lower cost energy, better energy efficiency, better energy management, anything that's related to energy and a benefit to the California ratepayer. Entrepreneurs often see the same barriers when they're trying to launch their product. It can be that they come from the technical side and they don't really have the business acumen to know how to take their business from the idea to an actually business where they're making revenue. It can also be inability to really test their technologies. What are some of the services that they're looking for when they need to test their technology or get it out in a demo site or just move it further along on that path? Many of them also have financial strains. It's really difficult for entrepreneurs to find the funding they need to get that technology out there, especially in the very, very early stage. So that is all the areas that the California Energy Commission wanted these energy centers to address. So they did that by creating 4 different regional clusters. As you can see here, there's one to the south, that's the San Diego cluster. It covers the greater San Diego area and also the Imperial Valley area. Then there's the LA cluster, which is called Energize California. It's hosted by LA Clean Tech Incubator in LA. And then there's the Bay Area, which is Cyclotron Road. And that one is a little bit different because they don't work with your average entrepreneurs off the street. They only work with very high-tech technologies coming out of the national labs and trying to get that hardware commercialized and out in the marketplace. And then what they did is that they took the rest of California, 2/3 of it, and put it under the Central Valley cluster, which we have named the Blue Tech Valley cluster. They gave each of the clusters $5 million and 5 years to create this ecosystem of entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, investors, and testing facilities, but all with a common goal of addressing the barriers that the entrepreneurs are facing today when they're trying to commercialize their technology. They also had 2 other legs in this ecosystem that they were building. One is Navigant, and that is really more a consultant service for the clusters and for the ecosystem to address some of the issues that they're looking at. It can be how do we really quantify what the benefit to the ratepayer eventually will be when we get these technologies out? Or can we do some market research that are saying what are the trends we're seeing, just to really guide the clusters in the path of what technologies that they should be looking at. The last one is probably more important. It's CalSeed. They put $24 million into a fund, and those money are going to go to, in small grants, to entrepreneurs and innovators that are trying to commercialize their product. The first portion you can apply for is a $150,000 grant, and it will go to entrepreneurs that have either an idea or probably prior to prototype in that very, very early stage where it's almost impossible to find any other funding. And if you qualify and you get that 150, you can apply for an additional $450,000 to actually take your product through commercialization. There's $4 million set aside for specifically disadvantaged communities, either solutions that can be deployed in those communities or entrepreneurs that are from those communities. Last year, they got 320 applications and 24 entrepreneurs actually got funded out of those 320. They are going to do the next round of application in January, and they're really, really pushing for seeing more activities from the Blue Tech Valley and from the Valley in general, because there was just a very strong bias from the Bay Area cluster, and they really want to see much more coming out of here. So hopefully, if you know of anyone who's interested, it'll be great to get that in next year. So what we did in the Blue Tech Valley, because we're covering such a large area of California, 39 counties going all the way from the Oregon border to the Kern County in the south, we created a hub and spoke model and are working with 5 other CSUs as our hub throughout California. One of them is CSU Bakersfield, where we are working both with the CERC Center, but also the Small Business Development Center on campus. We're also working with Monterey Bay, Chico, Sacramento State, Humboldt, and the Business Council Small Business Development Center in Truckee. Our approach is really regional. We don't want all the entrepreneurs to come to Fresno. We really want them to grow and flourish and create their businesses in the local areas where they originally started. But we want them to make sure that they have a full view of all the resources that we can provide, and where the region can't really have the opportunities we do, we would like to provide them with the resources and services that we have locally in Fresno. We also have a number of partners, Kern County EDC for one, but also a number of others that will be, that can provide different types of services to the entrepreneurs. We have a business plan competition with UC Davis. We have very strong legal assistance coming out of UC Berkeley. And with the Schatz Energy Center in Humboldt, we are actually able to give vouchers to companies that want to have their technology tested up there. So just a lot of services that each of the entrepreneurs can choose from when they enroll in the program. Just briefly going over what our objectives are. We're really focusing on water, energy, and ag. It was very clear from the California Energy Commission, they wanted each hub to focus on, or each cluster to focus on what is really the industries that are dominating in your area, and this is what we have focused on. And we want to make sure we really create this rich ecosystem that will help the entrepreneurs get their product out and also eventually benefit the California ratepayers. Lastly, we have a strong focus as well on the disadvantaged communities, both to help the entrepreneurs that are from those areas, but also finding better energy technologies that can be deployed in the disadvantaged communities. Just quickly overview, and I know this is a very worthy slide, a lot of words on it, but it's just some of the technologies that we're looking for. We're looking for generation technologies. It can be storage, transmission, distribution, and end-use technologies as well. Water-saving technologies will be one because of the water energy nexus. So really a wide range of technologies will benefit from this program and will be eligible to tap into the services that we provide. Some of the things that we do in Fresno is that we always start with our TIE program, which is Technology Innovation Evaluation. So when we get in contact with a new entrepreneur or innovator, it can be someone with an idea on a paper or actually with a product that they are ready to launch or maybe already are generating some revenue. We take them through the Technology Innovation Evaluation process. It's about an hour meeting where we evaluate their technology and give them honest feedback on where we think this technology should go, if it should go anywhere, but really helping them by being honest, but also providing with what are some of the next steps they should take on this path. That is a committee of subject matter experts, both on the technical side, but also on the business side, to give them a better idea of the market product fit also. And then from that meeting, if we feel that they are a good, solid technology that we can work with and they will actually be able to take it somewhere, we create a plan for them where we help them identify some of the next steps they should take, and also where can our services be plugged into that, or where can some of our partner services be plugged in. We do a lot of training as well. We have a bunch of webinars. We have a very large service area, as you just saw, and that's why we do a lot of it online. A lot of the meetings are video conferencing as well, and a lot of our webinars, of course, you can tap into from any location. At Fresno State, we have the Water, Energy, and Technology Center, where we do have some office space available for entrepreneurs, and we also have a plug-and-play space. So if you don't necessarily want to commit to an office, but you would like to work out of the facility maybe once or twice a week or a month, you can get access to our plug-and-play space. And that's also where we have our testing and demonstration site, both in the lab, but also on Fresno State University ground, where we have a full functioning farm, for example. And then we have a bunch of events, because it's very important for entrepreneurs, as you know, to go out and meet people and get a network, maybe create some contacts if it's maybe for sale or help or any other things that they might be looking for. So that's all part of the ecosystem that we're trying to create. I would lastly just touch on the Valley Venture Accelerator. It's part of the Blue Tech Valley, but it's also separately funded by a grant we got from the EDA. It's an I-6 innovation grant. And with the accelerator, we take the best entrepreneurs and companies that we see come through our Blue Tech Valley system, and we take them through a 4 months really intense training period in Fresno, where they have to be there 2 days every month. As all other accelerator, we of course are focusing on getting them ready to pitch to investors and get that initial funding. But we're also probably spending more time on really training them into how do you create sales, how do you create growth in your own company, how do you create revenue, and how do you really grow your business. Because eventually, even if they get funding or not, that's really what's going to set them aside. So we spend a lot of time with them on how do you do that. That's also why in the accelerator we are working with companies that are already generating some kind of revenue, because if you have to make a difference in 4 months, you have to be kind of right there where you're ready to get your market or get your product to market. We are finishing our first cohort this December, and we are looking to start the next one in the spring. But that's just another really great things that are coming out of this program, because there's no really accelerator in the Valley. So we are hoping that we can bring a lot of support to local companies that are interested in going this route. So if you are interested in getting involved, we're always looking for entrepreneurs with good ideas, innovators, small businesses that might fit in this space as well, subject matter experts that would like to connect with entrepreneurs and innovators in the energy space, mentors, investors, or anyone else that think that they would like to be part of this ecosystem. Thank you, and if there's any question, we're having a booth outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Hele. And yeah, that talk about a best practice, and they have really hit on the incubation acceleration theme, which we obviously need to emulate. And most people may not realize, but 80 to 90% of companies that are incubated in your local community stay there. So it's a great talent attraction as well as retention effort. We're actually excited. Yesterday, the Board of Supervisors and working with the CEO's office had approved a great incentive policy to focus on the next generation of business, and in line with the economic development strategy for the county. And as I was saying at the hearing, this we'll make the short list, get invited to the dance, whatever, for a lot of projects that we may not have been in the past. And this will apply to tech companies, 10 employees and above in terms of what pay as well. So very innovative, and I appreciate their vision and leadership and partnership as we move forward and market this, not just regionally, but nationally. And one other stat, tech space in our area, by many accounts, is 20 times less than in the Bay Area. So with the mention of the internet, et cetera, we should be able to start these type of businesses here. Many companies, as they move forward, look for space as well as a space that does not cost an arm and a leg. Not just housing affordability, but availability of space. So I want to bring up the panel, especially where are we headed in the future in terms of our main energy industries. So we're going to have the 3 panelists come up, and Todd, are you? And so we're going to have Todd Stevens, who will moderate, President and CEO of California Resources Corporation. Then we have Bill Bardling with Dogger, Department of Oil, Gas, Geothermal Resources. And we didn't even mention geothermal. By the way, I believe we have the largest geothermal plant in the country, or North America. Come on up. And then Suzanne Noble with WISPA, and as well as Don Grafton with BHE. So without further ado, oh, there's Todd. Thank you, Todd. And I'll leave the stage now. Appreciate it.
Real pleased to be up here and lead the discussion about the future of energy in Kern County. As all of you know, energy in Kern County is something that has driven the economy of Kern County for a long time. Agriculture and energy, particularly oil and gas production, has been important. I think one thing you'll learn is, just like our nation, I think Kern County has taken the role of an all-of-the-above strategy. The one that I think no one's picking up is nuclear, but I personally believe nuclear would be an important part of the all-above energy strategy. But it'll be great to talk about what some of the oldest renewables, geothermal and wind, when we get talking about it. I think actually geothermal, because I've looked into this, has more regulatory issues than probably even oil and gas business when you think about regulatory issues and when you talk about oil and gas. So I think Don probably deals with more issues than anyone else. I think it's really important to think about because our industry, the energy industry here in Kern County, provides valuable jobs that enable the middle class really lifestyle to occur, good industrial type jobs. So when we talk about this, we're going to talk about some questions and ponder what's going on in Kern County. We're permitting a ton of solar. We're doing a lot of wind. We did the Kern County EIR to facilitate oil and gas. In a state that is pretty anti-industrial work, unless you want to build a brand new football stadium, it's pretty hard to get things permitted. So, I mean, even when Tesla has to go to Nevada to build their battery factory, it tells you how hard it is to permit things to get jobs done in the state. So I think it's really critical when you think about industrial jobs and good middle-class jobs for people with high school diplomas and not college degrees. It's really important to think about energy industry here and what we've done in Kern County over the decades that it's been here, arguably 100 years. So when I think about this, we look at what's going on in California. We have the highest poverty rate. We have some of the highest energy prices in the nation, and only about a third of our graduates have bachelor's degrees. What do you guys think is the pathway to continue the middle class growing here in Kern County? And I'll start with Suzanne, since she went to high school with me at BHS.
I knew you were going to make this hard on me, Tom. Well, regarding the poverty rate, I think the oil and gas industry in California, we do give people, can you hear me all right? Okay. We do give people across the educational spectrum, in particular the working class, the avenue to the middle class. And I have a whole bunch of WISPA fact sheets up here, so if you want to go to our website and see any of these statistics, but I brought a few statistics with me. But I mean, just under 40% of the workers in our industry actually only have a high school degree or less, and 30% have maybe an associate's degree. And what's most astounding about this is most of these jobs, about 20%, or I'm sorry, most of these jobs have more than a 20% higher income than the average in California. So I think our industry provides those type of jobs, especially here in Kern County, that can help those who maybe didn't have the opportunity to go to college and still want to be in the economic middle class of our communities in our state.
Thanks. Bill, what do you think from a government's perspective? What's your role? And I mean, obviously you have a background in our industry. What do you think the role is to facilitate, this kind of opportunity set to develop a growing middle class?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Thanks for allowing me to be here. It's a real honor. So, as Todd has articulated, as Susan, the oil and gas industry is a very broad spectrum employment opportunity space, right? It ranges from high-end PhDs doing high-performance computing and geophysical modeling, earth modeling, down to, or including the oil field workers who can make a great living getting the oil out of the ground. So you can extend that perspective onto kind of the accessory opportunities, which is, for instance, my organization. And so we employ the same kind of spectrum of people: geologists, engineers, oil field experienced workers, field engineers, clerical, IT people. So it's you can think about kind of the follow-on effects of generating producing a barrel of oil out of the ground in terms of its economic impact. In all the accessory occupations that come with the consulting agencies, we're in the permitting agency in the aquifer exemption or business, and in all of those we meet with lots of different kinds of people: consultants, operators, people that are interested in all aspects of this. And so what we see is a very rich employment space, which captures a variety, an incredible variety of different kinds of skill sets and experience. So, I mean, from my perspective, we as an agency, our role is to work with the companies to make sure that that the production is done according to certain standards that the state has applied. But I think it's really encouraging to see, again, this spectrum of employment opportunities and the people that we meet every day, that across the board, generating income and buying T-shirts and lattes at Starbucks every day. It's just a really neat thing.
And Don, what's your take?
The way I think we get to improving the economy is really through the development of infrastructure. Basic infrastructure, and Richard mentioned it earlier, the Tehachapi Renewables Transmission Project. That project drove a lot of the wind and solar development and renewable energy development in Kern County. Over 11,000 megawatts of energy being developed in Kern County. Would that have been developed without the Tehachapi Renewables Transmission Project? That's a great question. But it was developed, and all the jobs, both in construction and then subsequent operations, and then the ancillary jobs that build off of that. One that comes to mind is WWS, located in Tehachapi. I remember speaking with Daryl Ragsdale back in 2013, and they had 15 people in their company. And he asked me, what do you need? I said, well, I said, the tumbleweeds in Antelope Valley are killing us. I need some help. And now they have over 250 people, a large private employer in Kern County, and they have expanded into maintenance operations, light construction operations, service industries, and that employing local Kern County citizens, that wouldn't have happened without the Tehachapi Renewable Transmission Project. And so the ability to provide those local jobs and provide good, safe working jobs for people who are real excited. And I think WWS is a success story of a small business taking an initiative, growing. Talk about incubation of businesses. A small business willing to say yes, we'll do that for you. Yes, we can do that. It's really helped them, and I think it's a great success story.
So from what I hear from folks, because obviously Kern County is currently the #3 producing oil and gas county in the lower 48, and a few years ago was actually #1. It's slipped a little bit, but I think we've been an incredible economic driver by renewables, putting in wind power and solar power. Is the permitting in Kern County easier for you guys I know from our sector how it is, but how is it relative to wanting to do something in LA County or somewhere else in the state?
I would say Mr. Murphy said it the best, and what Kern County is not. It's really nice to be able to pick up the phone and get an answer, get a decision. I don't think it's any easier. Obviously, Kern County is really good at following all applicable regulations and laws that are required. But the ability to pick up the phone and get an answer, the quickness that they turn around plans and permits, and the ability to work with you and to accept, as Mr. Murphy said, the phone call. I've made that call to Mr. Murphy a time or two. And so that is a real asset to the county to be able to have that discussion. And so when we think about developing renewable energy 5-10 years ago, there were no codes for it. It was brand new. You had a couple wind turbines, but you're talking about some of these large solar projects that cover thousands of acres with technology that was straight off the shelf, first of its kind. How do you permit that when there is no code? How do you permit that when there is no precedent? And the imagination, innovation, and the discussion that you can have from county government is fantastic and amazing. And then the vision, the supervisors, Kern County supervisors and the planning departments is absolutely amazing to say, we're going to have 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy in 2011. I mean, that is an amazing vision, and they've exceeded it. So it's a truly remarkable, that type of vision and planning and the ability to execute on that is really makes doing business in Kern County really fun.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into what one of my personal pet peeves is how much of our energy in California is imported from foreign sources and from other states. Because in my mind, I have also a background as an Army officer, the security issues dealing with foreign energy sources, then effectively you're exporting jobs elsewhere. I mean, to give you some context, over 90% of our natural gas is imported. Over 2/3 of our oil is imported from foreign sources. Only about 11% of that's from Alaska, and 32% electricity. So in effect, we're incentivizing job creation in other parts of the world, in other states. The actual amount of electricity that's imported is going up. That's why it's nice to hear Kern County has been facilitating, electrical generation here in the state. But I think it's frustrating when you look at that. I mean, what can from your perspective, I think I know my perspective is that, better permitting, more predictable permitting, no matter what you're doing, because again, it's an all the above energy strategy for us to be more self-sufficient as a state and a country. What would you want to do if you were kind of king or queen for a day, to help facilitate so that we don't have to depend on, electricity generation in Wyoming or other places, and crude from the Middle East, or those kind of things. I mean, I'll start with you, Don, and work our way back.
Sure. I'll go back to my original one, is infrastructure. The development of infrastructure can help drive the development of energy and the development of businesses, whether it's transmission lines, roads, pipelines. Then the second part of that is developing, the critical infrastructure is to help drive smart grids. And, that goes down to the education and to make sure you have technical jobs that can drive in these substations to improve the smart grid. If you think about, looked it up, it's public knowledge, but so far this year, 358,000 megawatt hours of renewable energy have been curtailed due to congestion. So if you think about, you ask the question of, well, how can we become more energy independent? California creates a lot of renewable energy. It's only going to grow, as with the duck curve graph that was shown earlier with the deployment of rooftop solar and continual renewable energy being brought online. The ability to move and transmit that renewable energy that is available to you, because that 358,000 megawatt hours is only going to grow. It's only going to grow. So the transmission lines, smart grids to be able to put the energy where it's needed the most can really help push the energy independence. Because if you talk about the energy importing, imagine if Kern County wasn't producing 11,000 megawatt hours of renewable energy. That number would be even more.
So you think more energy infrastructure in Kern County could turn it more into even a hub? Because it's a hub, I know, for natural gas going north or south into PG&E and SoCal. So when you think about it, it can become a hub if they do the kind of infrastructure spending to wheel electricity around the state.
Absolutely. It's in a great geographic location. A couple hours to the north, you're in the Bay Area. A couple hours to the south, you're in LA area. Even access to San Diego, and then again, a couple hours to the east, we start getting into Nevada and Las Vegas. So you can even become a net energy exporter, at some point, which can then drive, economic growth to export to Las Vegas at some point.
Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you. It's actually a really interesting and important question, and we talk about it a lot. And there's some statistics that I'll share with you, actually published by a friend of mine named Mark Mills, and one of them is that we're actually in one of the second great energy consumption revolutions, and the first was transportation, and the next one are these things, right? So your 4G phone consumes 60 times more energy in the grid than your 3G phone did. So this is turning into a major step function in energy demand and consumption, which is a really unprecedented since the onset of transportation fuels. So it's an important question to ask: where are we going to get this? Where are we going to get this energy, especially electricity, which these things all run off of? Another statistic that kind of underscores this change is that the number of transistors that are manufactured every year today exceeds the number of grains of wheat that are harvested. And these are all going into data centers, right? So these Walmart-sized data centers, there's 400 plus of them in the U.S. today. And they're all powering these things. It's all about big data analytics, the Google data centers, the Amazon data centers, these big cloud computing centers. And more of what we do every day is moving into that environment. So it's a really important question, right? Where are these electrons going to come from? How are we going to transport them around the state? So,
well, and the reliability of the grid. I think California has the worst reliability. It has more than twice as many outages as the next grid, which is Texas. So it goes back to Don's point on infrastructure. Maybe we need to do a better job of that and getting the reliability factor up. And and it's the complement of whether it be renewables in the midday or natural gas or however you're going to use to fire things to keep things level loaded so people can power their phones and everything else, right?
Yes, and don't forget there's a stated intention by the governor, by the state, to increase the number of electric cars on the road in the next 20 years. So as we're all plugging in our electric cars, we either need more power plants or more walls, one of the two, right, where the energy comes from. But it all comes down to the infrastructure. Where does the energy come from? How do you store it? How do you move it? So from our perspective at Dogger, and I want to build on what was previously mentioned here about permitting efficiency. So I've just passed my second anniversary at Dogger. And what we've tried to do in the last couple of years is improve our ability as regulators in a couple of dimensions. And one is organizational efficiency, so that when the phone rings, that we can quickly come to an answer and deliver a permit, deliver an answer, deliver instructions or questions, whatever it needs to be, so that we can try to streamline that process as good as we can. And the other important thing that we're trying to accomplish, this is all part of the renewal plan that was published by Steve Bolin and David Bunn 2 years ago, is to really increase our technical prowess, right? So what we've done to do that is increased our staff considerably. We've brought in a lot of people from industry with a lot of great experience, both in how oil fields operate and especially in how to operate technologies. We have brought in new technologies in the organization, and even to the extent last month were awarded 2 awards for innovation by Oracle as a result of our big data analytics implementation that we've done to try to take a look at the 100 years of data in California oil fields, with the intention of being able to execute those other 2 important objectives, which is streamlining and shortening the time cycles on these things, but also importantly to come to much better answers, so that in our communications with operators as we're working with you to work on the 60,000 active oil wells are in Kern County. 78% of the active wells in California are right here in Kern County. How do we work to make sure that this industry is maintained, but we also are respecting the laws that govern how that energy is extracted from the ground? So those are the big things that we're trying to do. But I think the question of where does the energy come from, that most of the imports come from Saudi Arabia. There's been discussions about, at least in conversations I had, about what are the human rights records of these countries are getting these from, where the environmental records of these countries are getting things from.
I had a conversation with the governor last week about this, because he gets tarred and feathered by the extreme left of his party because he supports native production, but he's like, why do I want to export jobs to countries that don't have good environmental records, that don't have the human rights records, and then I have to transport across the ocean to get it here. And it's not, he understands it's not just a transportation fuel, it's also used in so many products that make our lives, including a phone you held up today, possible. So I think it's important, government to understand that going forward. Suzanne.
Todd, you mentioned, what's the role or responsibility of government in regards to the dependency on energy imports, and I want to focus a little bit more on that. I mean, the structure of our especially our state legislature, it tends to lead itself on the highest and the most strictest standards for businesses in this state. And one thing that I think is important is that our representatives need to be patient and let the regulatory agencies do their job. I find that a lot of the representatives pass laws, and they also want to see about implementing those laws, and a lot of times they don't have the expertise that they need to implement them appropriately. That's a hindrance on business. It's also very costly, where you have the regulatory agencies that know what they're doing, and they do it appropriately and in a timely manner. I also think we have to be cautious that we don't put policies in place that not only hinder but limit our availability to all energy opportunities in our state and in our country. And I think that also legislators need to think long-term as opposed to the immediate day-to-day effects or what they read in the media. But I think they need to take the responsibility and make sure that they are looking out for your energy supply from all avenues. And let's face it, 92% of the transportation fuels in California are petroleum-based. And although there's plenty of space and room for alternative energies, it's going to take some time before that percentage is going to change dramatically. So we need to really be realistic about where we are and what we're doing in the state, not only from a day-to-day basis, but from more of a long-term perspective. And I think the government needs to take a more responsibility in that role.
No, I think I would tend to agree. I think the biggest problem we have is every topic in every industry has become so politicized. You know, our industry, pharma, banking, everything's become so politicized, so you can't have an open, honest discussion like we're having today saying, you know, I think we all believe in all of the above, makes sense, and we're interested in energy security and the like. But the narrative that goes on, particularly in this state, it's so different when you travel around the country and talk to different people, because the narrative here gets hijacked really by media and NGOs, effectively, who are, you know, anti the oil and gas industry and pro. And they're not even sure what they're pro, but they're for, I think, solar power. If they knew some of the stuff with geothermal, they might not like geothermal. But it's sort of interesting that, you know, they play fast and loose with the facts, and no one's had an honest discussion about, you know, where does the rare earth minerals come from? Where does the lithium come from? All the mining, all the issues associated with supply chain associated with all their hopes and aspirations. And in the meantime, everyone wants their, you know, power to be on when they go to turn on their power and charge their phone. So what can we do in private sector and in the government sector to help change this narrative so we have a kind of an honest discussion about what's possible and probable? I mean, you had the thing down in Oxnard with the natural gas power plant, and just, you know, the loud most people shouting in the room seem to basically be able to shout it down with the California Energy Commission. But if you talk to people who work on the grid behind the scenes and are afraid to speak publicly, they'll tell you we really need to have this for reliability purposes. But again, how can we change that in our, you know, in our public and private sector? And I'll let you go ahead and start, Suzanne, work our way back.
Well, I don't have the answer on how we change it, but I'll say that stability is very important for all of us. We also need, in going forward, in order to achieve our goals and our needs, again, I think from a long-term perspective, we need to be more pragmatic about how we measure and how we approach the development of our energy policies, and I think that's key. You know, again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I really think that we just need to, you know, come together, be patient, and work together, especially to address that, especially what happens in the mid, long-term future.
Thanks.
So let me just say a few things about this. So first, there's an awful lot of influence going on in Sacramento through the legislature, through the governor's office. My world is isolated to oil and gas and geothermal, right? So we work in that space, and I'll tell you where our direction is going. And again, it goes back to the fundamentals of the renewal plan from a couple of years ago, is a mandate to be data science and engineering driven in all of our decisions. So when you put the data together and you put sound science and engineering as a foundation for how you describe phenomena, for how you talk about regulations, for how you talk about operations. The ideal case is that we will all look at the same information and come to the same conclusion because it describes itself. So trying to take ambiguity and agendas out of the equation is our goal, and this is the foundation of why we've done what we've done. It's certainly here in Dogger, in Bakersfield, and statewide, is to really change our foundation from one historically where it's been to one which is really emphasizing data science and engineering as a foundation for everything that we do. So it becomes defensible in every conversation you can have, and we've found certainly since we've implemented those things that our dialogue with industry, with other third parties, has been much more productive, so we can work from a common foundation of data and science and engineering.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. The information, science are incredibly important in having discussions with anyone, whether it's your regulators, third parties, company to company, et cetera. Starting in the facts, if you can establish a base set of facts around a discussion or a decision, that can really help drive you to a common outcome, a win-win scenario for everyone. If you can start in good science, let's establish what the science of the issue is or the facts around the issue. It can really help you get to a commonality a lot quicker.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we've done at California Resources, and it was prior to the spinoff. I actually spent some time with Willie Brown in San Francisco. He was, most of you know who Willie Brown is, but he's someone, even in his 80s, is probably in touch with what's going on in California politics as anyone. And he told me the big problem with your industry is you have been a punching bag and been not just reactive to everything forever. You just stood there and let people beat you up, and you assumed because you're full of engineers and scientists that the facts will win out. But you know, as he told me, when it becomes a political issue, facts don't matter anymore. So I think from our perspective, we're trying to be much more proactive, get more engaged, talk about what we do as an industry and what we don't do as an industry, you know. So to make sure people understand and get beyond, you know, fear mongering and the kind of things and the importance that our industry plays in your daily lives, in everything you do. And again, it's not just the transportation fuel. So I know as California Resources, it was something that was very important to me and very passionate to get out there and be proactive. Part of it we have outside the Magic Barrel, Ray Clanton and some of our employees have done this on their own. It's to be instructive and show people what really goes on in our industry. And I think it's important for people to understand every industry, particularly the communities you live and work in, you know, what do you do and what don't you do? And I think that that's something we've done as a company a little different to try to change it long term. To Suzanne's point, you're not going to change it overnight. The goal is really to change the long-term views and get people to have a practical, real discussion about the energy needs and how they're escalating, where we're going to get our energy from, and do it in a cost-effective way. I know we have some utilities in here, but to be honest, they don't care how much it costs, okay? You know, I told you early on, we're one of the top, you know, paying energy consumers in the country on, you know, so they get to just turn around and charge you. It's called rate base, okay? I've seen rate base mentality firsthand in all kinds of utilities around the country. They love to pass on, you know, cost plus to you. So it really is, you have to have an honest discussion about energy poverty, what it does to people. You know, people in Malibu and in San Francisco don't care. They don't have to turn their air conditioners on this summer. But people in the San Joaquin Valley do. People in the Inland Empire do. So when you keep jacking up rates, you have to think about cost effectiveness and how it affects the humans involved here and how we, you know, might cause homelessness and other things. So I think it's very important we have a honest discussion about what these things do and the policies do as you roll through costs in the system, because we've got to remember the utilities at the end of the day just get to pass them on to you, you know, when you want to turn on the light switch. So I think it's really important as we talk about this. What do you think the energy future in Kern County looks like 5, 10, 15 years? I think clearly as a state we're going to hopefully be more self-sufficient as we have more renewables that can fill the middle of the day up, you know, when you talk about solar and the like. But when you start looking at the increased energy usage and the need to have oil and gas long-term for all the reasons we talked about, what do you think it looks like here in Kern County? I'll start with you, Don.
Well, I think you're going to see more renewables with the mandates coming out of Sacramento. Is number one. I think you're just going to see more of that, more renewables in Kern County. Because it's a great resource for both wind and solar from a geographic perspective, so that's exciting.
Is the best wind part, is that over in the Tehachapi because of the elevation change in the high desert?
The elevation change in the high desert. There's also a climate phenomenon that occurs there where the heat from the desert and the coolness of the ocean basically create natural wind that occurs at the later in the day versus when it's really needed. As you saw with the duck curve ramp from 4 to 7 to 8 to 10 p.m., the increased need for energy. It's really one of the nice things about the Tehachapis is there's a lot of wind that occurs during those times, which is really when it's needed. I think you're going to see more energy storage. I think you've just got to. With the wind and the solar in the area, you're going to see more energy storage to be able to dispatch that energy, because instead of curtailing it to a loss where it just goes nowhere, curtail it into energy storage, save it, so when it's needed during later in the day or early in the morning when everyone turns on their coffee pots, or later in the day when everyone comes home and turns on the nightly news, you need to give that energy.
Yeah, I like this hybrid plant concept with you have a peaker kind of natural gas plant with the storage, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, and I think the answer, what does it look like 10 years from now? I think the question is, we don't know. I think it's a matter of got to be flexible and create a base economic and regulatory environment that fosters growth. Because we think about 10 years ago, in 2007, oil was over $100 a barrel. You think about everything that was going on in 2007, the idea of 11,000 megawatts of renewable energy being in Kern County, I'm not going to say it was a pipe dream, but it was not on the forefront of a lot of folks' mind. So let's think about, let's take it out 10 years from there. What is the energy grid going to look like? Well, I think it's about fostering a...
What do you think about the Western grid, and will that be helpful or hinder what we're trying to do in California and Kern County?
That's a great question, and we could spend all day discussing a Western grid and how it is, but I think you've got to set yourself up for success. And that means fostering a regulatory environment that can, when change comes on the horizon, can reach out and grab it. And reach out, whether a Western grid happens or not, California is going to need energy. And with the location to the Bay Area and to LA here in Kern County, really makes it a geographical, real center point for the dispatch of energy around the state. Now, if a Western grid happens, that's great. But if it doesn't happen, then it gives you a great opportunity to move energy around.
Yeah, it's particularly frustrating to me to see how the amount of electricity that's imported in the state continues to rise. Because, I mean, I just look at it just like the oil and the natural gas, it's exporting jobs elsewhere. You know, I happen to know a certain person who put a wind farm in Wyoming to sell the electricity to DWP at a premium and made a bunch of money on it. And it's that kind of thing, or they're selling, you know, DWP, you know, supposedly green, they have a whole bunch of coal-fired power that they use to do the same thing, which is effectively, again, exporting jobs elsewhere, which is not what we're in the business of doing, especially here in Kern County. We want to create more jobs in Kern County, ultimately. So what do you see, Bill?
So, as Hans pointed out, the mix going forward is going to be a mixture. Is going to be dictated by mandates from Sacramento, by incentives, and by the business climate. So, the price of oil goes up another $20, $30, $40. That will certainly change the incentives for the hydrocarbon production. But I think what's really interesting to me in terms of the oil and gas part of the business is when I look back over, you know, my exposure to the business the last 35 years. Innovation and technology, application of technology has been huge. Right? So I look at fields today in Kern County, and the people who did this are sitting in the audience, right? Took fields that were on their last legs and turned them into the highest production rates, you know, they've ever had. So the use of technologies through secondary recoveries, through short radius horizontal drilling, those kinds of things have put new life into old fields and extended the lives of these projects in ways that would never have been anticipated. So the application of technology will certainly be a driver for that. I think you take a practical look around the state, that there's going to be a need for hydrocarbons for a long time, especially for transportation fuels, even if we achieve the goal of electrification of the vehicles. And the interface between the economics, the regulatory environment, and the technology, you know, will really define what that looks like. But again, I'm always encouraged by what I see in the innovation space by oil and gas companies to be able to do both breathe new life into old fields, and especially, you know, in the last couple of years, working with them to do that in ways which is consistent with both existing and anticipated regulatory mandates. So there's a pathway through all of this which is compatible with all the goals, and that I think that will define the future. So I don't see hydrocarbons going away by any means, and especially if price goes up and innovation and creativity continues on the path, you know, I think you'll probably see a strong oil and gas community.
Particularly because I read something that talked about the new flexible cell phone screens, which is made out of the basic component is natural gas.
Yes.
So I think if that comes to fruition, there'll be a, you know, maybe the Marcellus and Haynesville will work again. Who knows? But it'll be natural gas prices will go up because of the cell phone boom. Beyond that, but yeah, it's so funny because people again only think of hydrocarbons in the sense of a transportation fuel. They don't think about the utilization for so many other things. So, Suzanne.
As you mentioned earlier, the majority of our domestic energy is produced in California, and right here in Kern County, we are the third largest oil producing state in the country. And also, according to the California Energy Commission, California is also the third largest gasoline consuming market on the planet, right behind China as well as the United States as a whole. And I bring that up because I like facts and statistics, but if you look at the fuel consumption of today, there's 38 million people in California, and that number is forecasted to grow to 48 million by 2040. And there's estimated at about 26 million passenger vehicles and light trucks on the road today. And as I mentioned earlier, and Todd mentioned, 92% of California's transportation fuels are petroleum-based. There is an opportunity in the future for alternative sources of energy to become more of an increasing source or share of our portfolio in the future. But I think you're going to see those numbers contribute to our energy needs at a more slower pace that sometimes is represented in the media and by other NGO groups. So I think we really need to keep it in perspective. But overall, from a regulatory and even an economic perspective, I think if you have transparency, you base your legislative decisions, hopefully, as well as your regulatory decisions on sound science, increase awareness of what our energy sectors bring to the economy from a state and local perspective, and also, make sure that the public is a part of those decision processes, and I mean all of us as a public as well. I think there's a really bright future for us all in the market, and I think it's going to grow, and I think it will become more diverse. But I just want to emphasize again that we keep it in a perspective and on a long-term approach when we look at the policies that drive the decisions in this state and our regulatory agencies.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand, because I think everyone focuses on the national level with Trump and the Republican Congress, but I think we have the reverse here in California, where we have, effectively Democratic control across all the houses in the governor's house also. And what's interesting is within the Democratic Party, just like in the Republican Party, whenever you're in power, you always fight among yourselves. You have this change where you have what I'll say moderate Democrats who are typically urban, Inland Empire, San Joaquin Valley. They're not the coastal Democrats who are very focused on jobs, the economy, because that's what their constituents care about. Then you have what I'll say are the coastal Democrats who are worried about things that no one else is worried about. And it's really interesting, because I had a discussion with one of the moderate Democrats who said he got in a shouting match with one of his colleagues, and he told them, "What are you trying to do, make California Hawaii?" And the guy said, "Well, what do you mean?" And we'll have no industrial jobs. All we'll have is retirees, service sector jobs, and tourists. And that was what his thing is. He goes, "What about the middle class? What about those kind of jobs?" And I think it's so important as we talk here today, because the narrative you get from the NGOs and the media is different. They would think, oh my God, how could the renewable energy people even sit in the same room with the oil and gas people, right? That they probably thought we'd come to blows or something. But that, if you believe the media. But I think it's important to understand that we're all being thoughtful, and we actually all utilize each other in different capacities. I know Chevron, ourselves, we augment our electricity usage with solar. I mean, it's important to understand we're all trying to do the same thing, and we view it, and I view it, as something that's very patriotic. Again, affordable, reliable energy is very important for us to be a first world nation, and I think people take that for granted. And everyone in here is trying to do that, basically here in Kern County, which is a thriving, energy county here in the United States. And I think in California, where we have this chronic energy deficit, I know all of you listened to our very vibrant earnings call yesterday, but we had a great point on there. 12% of the country's population is here in California. But guess how much of the energy imports in our country come to California? 53% of the entire United States energy imports come to this state. So you think about that, it's very reliant on somewhere else. But at the end of the day, that's just you flip it, the script, you say that's jobs being exported elsewhere. That's all that is. That's all that is. Whether it's electrical jobs, whether you can't permit something, new wind farm or doing something on the geothermal side. I know Unical had that for years, and some of these things it was very much struggled. So I mean, as you look at going forward, what would be each one of you? What would be the two things you would try to change to make Kern County more effective and even the state more effective, to be able to facilitate what we're talking about, energy and the future here in Kern County?
First thing I would say with Kern County is we need to keep doing what we're doing. Stick to the basics. Stick to the football season, so blocking and tackling that got us here. Being a government that you can communicate with, a government that you can work with, you can get things permitted in, the ball can move forward. I think that basics will help us going forward and help continue to grow Kern County. It's worked. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Keep moving forward in a positive direction, and continue to develop local talent to meet the next whatever is coming in the energy industry. Whether that is smart grids, smart homes. It seems like I turn on the TV, every other commercial slot is some new technology for a smart home. Whether it's controlling your AC, security. It seems like everybody's got their own solution for a smart home. Well, those require those are intellectual jobs, and those are intellectual folks who need to wire up the system. So you have a hybrid of an electrician with a hybrid of an instrument technician with a hybrid of good customer service, with computer science. So it's really a high-tech job. It's not just installing, a wall switch. It's much more than that. So I think it comes down to those two items, and then being ready to catch whatever's coming and being able to catch the next wave of however energy will develop.
Well, and going back to what we talked about at the beginning, where we said only a third of Californians adults have a bachelor's degree, and they all want to achieve middle class lifestyle. What do we do? What kind of policies do we make sure, from your perspective, that we continue to pursue or we implement or change to facilitate that? Because I think that's something, because you have people in Silicon Valley saying, let's get rid of them all, let's have robots. And they're kind of mute to the issues outside of Silicon Valley with industrial type middle class jobs.
Well, I think that it goes back to creating an environment of education and growth that, it starts at the most fundamental level that, and whether it's installing systems for energy systems in substations or in homes, that those are great jobs, and those are great jobs that are coming. And yes, Silicon Valley may create this tech, but somebody's got to install it. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to market it. Somebody's got to develop it. And those jobs are coming, and they're here and they're coming, but it takes a workforce that's ready to go out and get it, because you don't necessarily have to have a bachelor's degree to do that, but you've got to have the skills, the knowledge, the drive, and good work ethic to do that, which is something Kern County has always had as citizens with a great work ethic, and to continue to foster that and grow that will only.
Well, they had the forethought to put in the EIR to try to ensure that they continue to have an economic vibrancy here in the county.
So, on a kind of a high-level economics perspective, a successful society is dependent upon a spectrum of incomes and job skills. So the notion that we'll just have a wealthy class with robots is not practical, right? So that's not going to happen. So that economic model will collapse quickly, and realize that it's going to be dependent upon again, a broad spectrum of service providers and other kinds of workers in the economy. So I think that the market will mandate that the middle class continues to exist, because without it, the economy will collapse. From a regulator's perspective, we represent a pretty broad spectrum of stakeholders, right? And statute, regulations, and policy are built on the kind of the sum of all of those interests. Once those policies are put in place, I think the most important thing that we do is, as part of the maximizing the job creation and maintenance, is to make our process as objective, open, and efficient as possible. So bottlenecks in the system are not good things, right? So how do you get out of the way and enable things to happen or not happen, but have transparency and objectivity in what those policies are and how they impact decisions, so that business can go forward. In my experience, the big problems in industry is uncertainty, both in cost and in time. So if you know what the costs are going to be, you can make sound business decisions based on that. If you have timelines that are reliable, you can do that too. So from a regulator's perspective, I think that's really our role is to try to be as efficient and open and objective and transparent as we can to enable the business to understand how they plan and model their path forward.
Suzanne?
You mentioned and it's a great example, the Kern County oil and gas EIR that I think Craig Murphy even touched on a little bit earlier. It's one of the most unprecedented EIRs in the country, in my opinion, especially in regards to its environmental safeguards. And I bring that up and I segue into what Bill said earlier, but the trade associations came to the county and applied to update the zoning ordinance for oil and gas. But it was really the local community who came in and supported actually taking a regulatory function from the state agency and bringing it to the local community for oversight. And I think that's significant in many ways, and I think it ties into a lot about what we've been talking about here today in regards to helping our economy grow in Kern County and California, job growth and otherwise, helping the working class have a pathway to the middle class. But also, I think that it provided the community the opportunity to play a substantial role in what occurs in our particular energy environment on the ground. And I think you're probably going to see that more and more throughout, especially this state and maybe in other states in the near future. And I think that brings the power to the local communities where the jobs need to be. And there's a role that all of us can play in that. We can play in it in regards to talking to your elected officials. Also, I got to put a plug in, we have the Kern Citizens for Energy here in Kern County. And that's a group that is nonprofits, Chamber of Commerce, local businesses, taxpayers, residents, and so forth, who want to see a robust and diversified energy industry in Kern County. And I think it makes us a very strong and powerful economy at the same time. So again, everybody's role, all the way from the legislators down to the regulatory agencies, down to the local communities, play a part, I think, in all of the facets that we've actually spoke about here today.
Yeah, actually, I'll finish up on this because I think it's really important. Under our prior parent, we were basically told as employees, don't get involved, don't speak out. And I flipped that switch on with CRC. I encourage all of our employees to get involved. I try to give them the tools to be involved. And it's important because it's not just important for us personally, it's important for our state to be successful, our county to be successful. You have to be engaged. You have to hold the people accountable. You have to push back when there's falsehoods. And trust me, politicians respond to people showing up and talking to them and telling them, you're affecting my livelihood and you're affecting your policies, your regulations, your proposals, your laws are things that are going to have a direct impact here in Kern County. And that's something I would encourage you to do, whether it be the local level or the state level, the federal level, get involved. Everyone is very willing to listen, irrespective of party, but I think it's important to get involved because trust me, if you don't, someone else will, and the NGOs and everyone else who's trying to deindustrialize our country will be there in their ears talking to them. That's why it's so important when you think about our future kind of affordable, reliable energy and the jobs that go with that. I think it's very important. And I want to thank Don, Bill, and Suzanne for being here today. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
hope you all had a nice break and some refreshments and getting ready, powering up for the next phase. We're going to bring up in a minute Neil Black with Cal Bioenergy. And actually, Neil helped me write my material, so if you don't like it, please blame him. I'm not. He is a Harvard MBA. He spends. He's bi-coastal, but he spends. He wants you to know he spends 3/4 of his time in the Valley, and the rest in Manhattan, I believe. And he says he knows more about manure than anyone on this block in New York. Okay, I trust you on that one. And his company was started by 5 Harvard MBAs. But he says that the farmer they work with is the smartest one in the team. So that's the question I have. How many Harvard MBAs does it take to run a dairy anaerobic digester? He will help. He will be answering those questions when he comes on stage. I have some more of his material. Neil, can I use your other joke? So he wants you to know he spends most mornings underwater, not in a dairy lagoon, but at McMurtry. Actually, I made up that last part. And I think the important part to realize is that the jobs that he has in terms of biogas, a lot of the skill sets are transferable. So we talk about all types of energy. So those STEM skill sets are conducive to what he's doing. And apparently he's hiring, right? Do you have to be a Harvard MBA to get a job there? Now, Neil, are you in the, do I see you, Neil? Oh, there he is. Well, again, thank you for being in our region 75% of the time. I'm not sure how that affects your state taxes, income taxes, or New York taxes, but I'm sure they're pretty similar, right? Neil Black.
Thank you for having me in this morning. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you and tell you a bit about what we do, and also just so pleased to follow the speakers this morning. And the important point I want to make is that Kern County, of course, is the center of the oil and gas industry in California, and it has such a leadership position in renewable energy, and it's also such an important ag center. And what we do is we combine all three, in that we're working with the dairy industry to collect the dairy methane and then put it into the gas, put it into the pipeline, working thus with the gas company and the oil and gas industry to create a renewable fuel source and renewable energy. And so I want to tell you a bit about what we do. First, as a background, as this slide shows, many of you might not realize, but even though that while you all live here, that the Central Valley in California is responsible for nearly 20% of the nation's milk. And the dairy industry in California is about 50% bigger than Wisconsin's, which is the second biggest. California is by far the biggest. And from a perspective of renewal, of creating energy, we don't create that much energy. But from the perspective of helping the state meet its greenhouse gas goals, we play a very important role. And so the numbers here is the industry could produce about 350 megawatts of baseload electricity, and that's about 850 megawatts on a peaking basis, because we could deliver the electricity when Southern California Edison or PG&E would need it. And we could produce about 170 million diesel gallon equivalents of fuel a year. We think in a measurement that most of you aren't used to. We think about everything in terms of a cow, and one cow produces about 100 diesel gallon equivalents of fuel a year. The dairy industry in the state produces about 50% of California methane emissions, and then half of that comes from how manure is managed. And so I'm going to show you a bit about how that's done and how we capture it. And the requirement is a 40% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from dairy manure methane by 2030. To date, there are 15 active dairy digesters, while there are 1,400 dairies, so it's about 1% right now. But there's a lot of development and a lot of activity. And what's also important is all the existing dairy digesters, with one non-commercial exception, produce electricity. And there's a significant incentive and encouragement for us now to be putting that gas into the pipeline and help have it be used to power trucks and buses in the Central Valley. There are major government incentives right now. Just to give you a little bit background on it, there are 2 incentive programs to help put initial projects, biomethane, into the gas pipeline. The California Department of Food and Agriculture, from GGRF funding, provided $35 million of grants in 2017 for dairy digesters, and that number increases to $76 million next year. And on the revenue incentive side, there are actually 3. I have 2 here. There's, of course, the low carbon fuel standard from California. There's the federal RIN program. And on electricity side, there's a biomat program, which is a feed-in tariff from all biomat sources, or bioenergy sources, with 90 megawatts coming from dairy and other ag sources. On an investment basis from the state perspective, dairy methane capture is one of the most cost efficient. And this is the results of a legislative analyst office study, and it's about $8 per metric ton of grant funding, government support, which makes it, in this chart, the 3rd most cost effective. So our company was founded in Bakersfield at Wool Growers, if people know the local Bosque restaurant, in 2006. And that was a pivotal dinner where I met with 10 of the local dairy farmers, and they helped us create the company. And we thought things would move very quickly, and I had more of a background in technology, and the support structure that I just referred to from the state really only came into place over the past couple of years. And so it was many years of very close working with the Sacramento policymakers and others in helping to develop the incentive programs and working very, very closely with the dairy industry to make sure these programs work for the industry. We have built 3 projects. We're completing 3 right now. We're beginning 10 more, and we're designing 25 more as we speak. We were very fortunate that we won grant funding for 10 new projects at the end of October, and that really is going to help define our work for the next, roughly the next 18 months. There are 5 goals in our company. One is to produce renewable energy. The second is to reduce dairy methane emissions while protecting local air quality, enhancing groundwater protection, and we add to the local economy and create jobs. We've spent about $40 million so far in Kern County. We will soon be spending about $60 million more, and we're also out hiring. So we really benefit from the local knowledge on the oil and gas side, and as I'll show you in a little bit, we're building a low-pressure gas gathering line system. And partly to deepen our relationships, we're very proud of the developing relationship we have with Cal State Bakersfield, where we're going to be working to help fill in the students about what we're doing, having summer paid internships for our students from the disadvantaged communities to help them learn about this intersection of ag and renewable energy. This just shows you on the map of the work we're doing with the Kern cluster, and it's 15 modern dairies southwest of Bakersfield. And the work we're doing in the Kern cluster is the basis of really our knowledge and our learning. And we're taking that knowledge from the Kern cluster and then using it for our developing efforts throughout the San Joaquin Valley. So we're now in early stages of developing 5 new clusters of dairy digesters, and our core learning has come from Kern. And we've been grateful for the support we've had not only from CDFA, but also from the California Energy Commission, and USDA. There are 3 Sustainable Freight Action Plan pilot projects in the state, and we're grateful that we're one of them, which has led to a cross regulatory agency support structure that has been very helpful to us. And locally, I could not be more grateful for the support that we've had from Kern County, from across the team in Kern County. Lorelei has been very, very helpful to us. And Craig, I wanted you to know that you shouldn't be surprised if you get a phone call from us in the near future about maybe a change or 2. But otherwise, we're very grateful for that working relationship with the county. In the Kern cluster, it has the capacity for about 5 million diesel gallon equivalents a year, or about 12 megawatts of renewable energy. And what we did is we began in the Kern cluster with electricity, and we're now migrating that our future projects will be vehicle fuel. And then the 2 of them provide a good complement to each other, with one providing long-term renewable, long-term contracts with the utility, while the other is subject to the volatility of the fuel credit markets, but also the incentives of those markets. I just wanted to show you a few slides of how a digester works. There's a screen up front, which you could see right here. Let me try this out. And this is a slope screen separator where the dairy manure water, dairy manure is moved with water. It's a very efficient way, and all the extra water over time then is used to irrigate the local cropland. And it's also a way to disperse the nitrogen, which is then used to fertilize the local crops. So the manure water goes over that screen, and then the solids are right here. And those solids are then are put out in the hot sun so that they're cleaned, and then they're used for cow bedding. The most important things to a dairy farmer are the health and comfort of their cows, and then the cows will make more milk. And then the water flows through here, and then from that right there, that is showing you just another picture of that screen, and then it flows through to this lagoon cover right here. And the digester is basically just aligned and covered, the digester is aligned and covered lagoon. And this is a picture of it when it was being lined. And it's very large. It's about 3 football fields long by 2 football fields wide. And then there's a whole second unit that's nearly the same size. This is the biggest dairy digester in the state, one of the biggest in the country, reflecting that this is a very large dairy, and it's about twice the size of probably the average that we'll be building over time. And I mentioned that we could store gas, and this is the cover inflated. We could store about a week's worth of gas, and the Public Utility Commission has actually approved dairy digester methane as an acceptable energy storage mechanism. And as I said, we can then work with the utilities and the electricity side to deliver the electricity when it's needed by the grid. This is a picture of our project generator set. We use Caterpillar engines and have a very close, terrific working relationship with Caterpillar, and it generates 2 megawatts of renewable energy. We also worked very closely with PG&E, and PG&E has been very helpful to us on our interconnection efforts over the years. In electricity projects, you have a digester at each dairy, and you also have a genset and interconnection to the electricity grid at each dairy. By contrast, on the fuel side, while you still have a digester at each dairy, you're then sending the dairy biogas, which is about 60% methane, to a central location where it's cleaned up and put into the grid, and put it in, it's interconnected to the pipeline system. This is a picture of the map of our Kern cluster. And in the bottom right here is our project that we've built on the Bedard Dairy. Right here is a project that will be coming online over the next 60 days. And then over here is a project that will be coming online probably over about the next 30 days. Those are the first three, and then we're going to, and we recently won grants for a project at this dairy and on these two dairies, and they will be being built over the next year. And then we'll also be building out the rest of the cluster in the subsequent year. Right here is the SoCal gas pipeline, and right here is the PG&E pipeline, and our plan is to be interconnecting right here into the SoCal gas pipeline. Right here is a gas gathering line that we'll be building, connecting the biogas from each of the different dairies to the centralized location. So there are advantages to electricity and there are advantages to fuel, and and a couple key disadvantages to each. The electricity side, we could earn a good revenue stream of about $25 per MMBTU, which is a mixture of the renewable electricity contract with the utility and the carbon credit. And we could have a 20-year contract with the utility, so it's a very bankable contract. The problem is when we have a local electricity generator, we emit NOx, and the air district doesn't want to be having a new source of NOx in the Central Valley. We're working very closely with the air district on how to decrease our NOx emissions, but it's a significant part of the reason the Air District and the Air Resources Board has been encouraging projects like ours to put the gas into the pipeline. On the pipeline side, we could receive a fairly remarkable price, and that is about $40 to $80 per MMBTU, which is made up of the renewable, the RIN value, as well as the low carbon fuel standard value. And thus it provides the economics to be, over time, building these projects, once especially there's more certainty in those programs that we won't need the type of grant funding that we've received to date. The advantage on the NOx side is it could then be used for the new fleet of near zero emission natural gas trucks and buses that reduce NOx emissions by about 90%. And this just gives you an understanding of something so many of you in the room are familiar with, which is the low carbon fuel standard. And it works by the difference between diesel and gasoline's carbon intensity and that of alternative sources. And because we're capturing methane that would otherwise be put into the atmosphere, dairies by far have the lowest carbon intensity score that exists, helping provide the economics that can make these projects work. This is just a quick chart to show you the amount of NOx that are being reduced. One is the avoided NOx by not having the electricity engine, and the other is by replacing the diesel truck with a near zero emission natural gas truck. And these are just a couple more pictures at the Lakeview project, one that's coming online shortly. It just kind of, these lagoons are actually very carefully designed. And this is a picture of us near a mixer that mixes the manure water to keep it flowing through at a steady rate and decrease the settling of solids, because that's kind of would be a problem over time to a digester. And this is a picture of a project that we're now constructing about 35 miles away in Buttonwillow. And then you could see on the left the liner of the lagoon, and these are built to the Tier 1 preference of the water board. And so it's really landfill quality, which in many ways it might be overkill for dairy manure water. It enables us over time to also potentially add non-manure substrates. And that's why you see a second cell here, which is a way to potentially take non-manure substrates over time. And as the state requires a significant amount of diversion from landfills, they're looking for places to be able to take that organic matter, and this would be an example of that. And on the right here is the existing lagoon, and so you could kind of see how dirty that is, and then it will be going into the 2 line cells that would then be covered. We increase the amount of the solids that are destroyed by the naturally occurring bacteria. So an output of it is a manure water that's easier for the dairy to use and integrate into its irrigation system. At this project, it's actually also part of a larger study funded by USDA for drip irrigation, for drip tape. And so it's been studied on using its manure water pre-digester, and then we're all suspecting that the decreased amount of solids and the more consistent liquid water will be much easier as a starting point for drip irrigation. So that's my overview of what we're up to here in Kern County. And now I'm based up in Visalia because Kern County is where all the oil and gas industry opportunities are, and Tulare is where all the cows are. And so we're following, like all of you, the cows, or you following the oil and gas industry. And as I said, we're taking that knowledge up to Visalia while we have our major operations and development efforts here in Kern County. So if anybody has questions afterwards, please come up and see me. And just want to thank you all for having me in this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce the Energy Summit's keynote speaker, Dr. Scott Tinker. Dr. Tinker is director of the Bureau of Economic Geology and the professor holding the Alday Endowed Chair in the Jackson School of Geosciences at the University of Texas, Austin. Among his many accomplishments, Dr. Tinker co-produced and is featured in the award-winning energy documentary film Switch, and has recently founded the non-for-profit Switch Energy Alliance with a mission to globally advance energy education. Just a short note on Dr. Tinker, and before I introduce him, I wanted to give you a quick introduction of 8-Minute Energy Renewables. I'm excited to have the honor to introduce Dr. Scott Tinker. He's been a leader really in bringing academia, government, and industry and NGOs together to address major societal issues in energy, environment, and the economy, which has led him to more than 55 countries where he's presented over 650 keynotes, I guess now 651. And his work has been published in the scientific literatures, Forbes, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal, as well as having appeared on NPR. So I think he's one of the forefront leaders, not just talking about energy and the technology, but also about how to integrate that. Before Dr. Tinker takes the stage, I would like to introduce our company, 8-Minute Energy Renewables. I'm sure many of you are aware of us. Our company has many projects here in Kern County. We're very proud to be part of the Kern County economic development scene. Let me introduce with the first slides. Do I need to move the slides? Or? Okay. The big green button, okay. Very good. Kern County really is leading California in solar PV installations. Actually, it turns out Kern County as a county is the largest county in the United States in terms of solar photovoltaic deployment. And I think that's something really to be proud of. Solar photovoltaics is obviously a new player in the energy sector, and our company, we specialize in solar photovoltaics, and we think that solar photovoltaics or energy from solar photovoltaic power plants will become the dominant form of energy supply in the United States. Now that's a few decades away, but this is when you look back, when your children look back to where it all started, Kern County really is the place, the birthplace where this new technology was supported, implemented with very good processes. So thanks to everyone in the organization, in the county, and the administration for supporting these new technologies. And as you can see on the graph down there, it's not just barely the biggest, it is by far the biggest in the county. This is what one of the power plants looks like. This is our Springbok facility out in eastern Kern County, and it is our mission as a company to make solar energy abundant and to be the industry leader in lowering the cost of dispatchable solar PV. Energy at the end of the day is a commodity. We're trying to generate it as clean as possible, and making it dispatchable really is the next step for renewable energy. I won't say much about the heritage and background of our company, but it is here really in Kern County. It is California. We're now all over the United States, which is very exciting for us. We're competing in Texas purely based on price, no longer driven just by a renewable portfolio standard, which helped us grow in California, but we're now head-to-head with fossil fuels and other forms of energy, competing on the merits of our product, which is clean, reliable energy, and the reliability is now being aided by adding energy storage to it. Before I jump into that, one more proud factor for our company and Kern County is Springbok 2, which is a 191 megawatt facility also in eastern Kern, was the first solar photovoltaic power plant in the country that beat fossil fuels. So it was the first time a power plant was operational, delivering electricity to the grid at a price below that of generation from fossil fuels. And that includes coal and gas. Gas right now is the cheapest form. That really was a milestone for renewable energies that used to be expensive, but for policy reasons, we got a lot of support, but now, for the first time, we were actually cheaper than burning fossil fuels. I'll jump over these. I get to energy storage. Energy storage comes in different forms. You can do pumped storage, et cetera, where you basically take water, pump it up the hill, and then let it run down when you need the power. There's a new technology, I'm sure most of you have heard about it, lithium-ion batteries, the same that runs your electric vehicles from Teslas to Nissan Leafs. They're all run by lithium-ion batteries. There's a huge industry now where these batteries are being mass manufactured. The cost of batteries has come down tremendously. The energy density and their capabilities have gone up tremendously over time. That trend will continue. And energy storage is going to become a huge part of the energy sector. It is literally, it's powering your laptop today. In 10 years from now, we will be able to run, and we're designing that right now, a power plant. We will be able to run Los Angeles on a battery for several hours. It's hard to imagine today, but in the future, we'll be running our cities on battery power when the renewable energy is not available to feed it. Obviously for solar doesn't work so well at night. You need to fill those gaps, but also true for wind, et cetera. So what makes this exciting is not that the technology didn't exist before, but that it's now becoming cost competitive. We can now offer a solar photovoltaic power plant combined with energy storage and offer that cheaper than a newly built gas-fired power plant. Now you have clean renewable energy that is dispatchable. And at that point, you're not going to build a gas-fired power plant. Sorry for the gas developers, but you're just not going to do that because you have no price volatility. Today, cost of gas is just below $3 a million BTU. You have no idea where that's going to be in 5 or 10 years. You're going to be subject to price volatility. And with solar and storage, you have a clean, dispatchable source of power that can power our entire economy at a cheaper or lower cost and lower volatility. So that's a real killer app that will completely change the market dynamics for the long term in the future. We're excited about Kern County being a part of that and being really part of the evolution/revolution that is going on in the energy sector. So very excited to be here and part of the Kern County community. Let me now introduce Dr. Scott Tinker, who's going to talk about Switch and the content of his presentation about how that transition from one energy sector to the other is working. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you. All right. How's everyone doing? Ready for lunch? We'll get the slides. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Switch, but not really. I want to talk today about energy, global energy, and some of the challenges, and hopefully have a few laughs with you. Hope you have your thick skins on. It is California, and it's so easy, you know. Anyway, and being from Texas, you know, we got to have this ongoing thing. So, what can Kern County teach the world about energy? Well, there's a dilemma I have, and the dilemma is this: most people don't know how electricity is actually made, and they don't know where gasoline comes from. The dilemma is they think they do, okay? Because they've been fed stuff from various sources that they select to stream to themselves in the morning and confirm their biases and think that everybody agrees with them, okay? So here we are, it's a dilemma. What's the dialogue? The dialogue, energy, we all know, has had a transformational impact on the quality of human life. Transformational. Without it, we're all sitting here hungry and naked in the dirt, okay? And I've been in a lot of places in the world today where people are hungry and naked in the dirt. Yet, political factions have created a good and bad energy dialogue in the public psyche. Renewables are good, fossils and nuclear are bad. That's pretty much the dialogue. Yet, a third of humans live in energy poverty on the planet today. So the roadmap for today, let's talk about the energy mix. What's it look like? What are the real environmental impacts of all forms of energy? What are the 3 E's? And finally, what's the power of energy? So this map, for every color on this map, and I hope you can see, because I have lots of slides, but you're going to love them, okay? It's not death by PowerPoint. Every color on this map is about 1 billion people today on Earth. So look at the population distribution. You can see the color code in the lower left. That's going to be the same for all of my slides. Green oil, red gas, gray coal, orange nuclear. We used to say nuclear in Texas for 8 years. There was a different president. And then we learned nuclear, and now I don't know what we're going to say. You know, everything is huge, so we'll say something. Anyway, 86% fossil fuels in the world today. How about geopolitically? Well, North America, no surprise, is about like the global mix. It's about 20% of it. You'd think Europe would be different. It turns out it's not. Europe and Russia are about the same. South America has a lot more hydro. They have topography and rainfall. Africa, more coal. The Middle East won't shock anybody. It's oil and gas. Okay. They're building a nuclear reactor, starting to look at some solar. And finally, Southeast Asia. Take a look. Half their energy from coal. This isn't electricity fuel. This is total energy. Now I'm going to scale these to be proportional to demand. Here we go. That's how much it's consumed today. Over half the people in the world live underneath that right color wheel. And they get half their energy from coal. That's more coal than the rest of the world combined times 2. Is China changing? Yeah, actually for the first time coal is just starting to roll over. We'll see where it heads, but look at it relative to the other fuels. It's massive. Has it changed through time? Yeah. Over the last 50 years, everything has gone up. And you can see the mix that's changed there with renewables and nuclear coming in and hydro over that time period. But let's get rid of the fossil fuels and nuclear and zoom in on the renewables. So here they are, mostly hydro over that 50 years. And let's keep zooming. Now you see the biofuels come in. And we can zoom further the last 15 or so years, solar and wind. And they are on exponential growth, as you've heard this morning. True. Everything grows exponentially if it succeeds initially. And then you can't have exponential growth wherever it goes linear, and then it rolls over. That's just math. Okay, that's the way things work. So these are succeeding with exponential growth in the phase they're in. Here's how it's going around the world. Asia in red, Europe in yellow. This is for wind. Growth in U.S. wind has been fantastic in good old Texas. You know, back about a decade ago with Barry Smitherman at the PUC, we started putting wind out in West Texas, and we have way more wind than anybody now, close to 18 gigawatts. You can't drive out without seeing turbines in West Texas now. Some people like them. The people out there do like them. Brings jobs. Okay. And then solar. This is PV. And again, you can see the geopolitical mix of where the solar is located. And solar prices have been coming down, absolutely. This is the cost of the units themselves in orange there, and then the growth in solar install, remarkable growth. And I can show these costs in lots of different ways. You can look at them as levelized costs, et cetera. Quite often, even LCOE does not include some things like the storage that's been talked about and transmission and other costs that are needed to make them either base load or able to follow. So there's costs that are not everybody fully understands what all goes into it. But absolutely, prices and costs have been coming down, and it's exciting. Here's the exact same data as a mix, not in real units, but as a percentage. So over a half a century, we've gone from 95% fossil fuels to 86%, with less oil, more gas, and a little bit less coal. Okay. Look at nuclear back in the 70s. Remember when Jimmy Carter declared, some of you are old enough, moral equivalent of war, energy. We started looking for other things. Nuclear took off for a while globally, and it's had sort of an interesting history. You can see the color there. It looks a lot like what? Renewables. 20 years, getting started, and we'll see where it heads. The challenge with all this is scale. If you get nothing else from me or nothing else from watching the film Switch, it's scale. The challenge of building a lot of things isn't easy. And the lower the density energy, the more things you have to build to collect it. And those things require materials and resources. And everything's a resource. Oil and gas and coal, uranium, thorium, the sun and the wind. Geothermal is a resource. Ask Iceland how often they move their wells. Tides and waves. Let's look at the electric fuel mix. Here's North America, and the forecast here I like. It said out by 2030, natural gas and coal would be sort of 50-50 at parity. And then you see the little bit growth in renewables and some nuclear. Has this happened? Yeah. In fact, it already happened. In a decade, coal went from 50%, or just a little more, down to 30%, and natural gas almost doubled. And renewables grew from 8 to 13. This is the fastest change in energy terms that we've seen or witnessed, okay? Remarkable. And as a result of that, CO2 emissions from coal about 2/3, natural gas about 1/3, the others not much. So those have changed as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So yes, it's happened. How did it happen? How many in the gas business? Let's go back just a decade to 2007, and I'm going to ask you to tell me, what will natural gas production look like in the United States in 2017 today? Here we are. Here's what it looked like then, 2010, and I'm going to give you some data. I'll give you the price, I promise. That's the price, and here are the rigs drilling for natural gas. I guarantee it. Now tell me what production looks like today of natural gas. That's the data, and you don't get that as forecasters, by the way. Would anybody have said this? Nope. Why? Fracking. Hydraulic fracking. Let's just, look, the New York Times put the K in there. Let's just embrace it. Yeah. Fracking. Like nukes. You know, nuclear doesn't have a K, but nukes does. I'm sure we'll spell coal with a K next. Anybody from the Times? You know, K-O-A-L. Let's just put it in there. So we got the F word with a K, and, you know, fracking. Nearly half of U.S. gas comes from hydraulically fractured wells today. Nearly half in a decade. We've done some big studies at the Bureau where I am on this for the last 7 years. We've looked at the 4 big shale gas basins. The result of all that work with engineers, scientists, economists. Here's one future possibility, realization scenario, not a forecast because these are dynamic things. But if you look at the Barnett, the Fayetteville, the Haynesville, and then the Marcellus out into that future, this is a production scenario. Very realistic one, actually, probably underestimating. The question was, do we have enough natural gas in the U.S. to continue to replace coal like we saw? The answer we feel is yes. The Utica and gas coming from shale oil basins now and then conventionals, it's pretty remarkable amount of methane out there. Here's the price deck that this one was run on. That's the EIA price deck, and there's their forecast from it, and we work closely with them. They're starting to use our models in their annual energy outlooks now. Okay, pretty great team. The result of those 4 basins looks like this. Original gas in place is 3,000 trillion cubic feet, OOGP, original OGIP. That chart that you looked at, that graph, produces 300 of that out to 2045, 10%. It leaves 90% of it still in the reservoir out to 2045. That's a pretty big target. I've got a son in the oil and gas business, geologist, a petroleum engineer, you know. People ask me, do you really believe this stuff you say? That or I lie to my kids. I probably do both, but 10%, 300 trillion cubic feet, whatever that is, 2,700 trillion cubic feet. Will we get some of that out? Sure. If there's demand, it's not really a resource issue, it's a demand challenge. What's the demand for different fuels going to be? If there's more demand for natural gas, we'll be going after some of those molecules, and technology will allow that. Globally, what's the resource look like? This is natural gas. It's the resource, these are big numbers, against the cost to get it. Those vary through time, so this is an older plot, but the point is, to the left of the white line is everything produced and consumed. To the right are potential resources out there. At $8, and here's the unconventional reservoirs. They're big numbers, right? At $8, remember those days? People were going after all this stuff. And then natural gas isn't fungible. It's geopolitically limited and traded and priced. So the success in North America brought the price down a lot, $2, $2.50, $3. And guess what? This stuff goes off the table if it's static. But when price come down, what happened? Costs follow. So watch the costs come down, and some of it stays on the table. The better parts of the better basins are still producing. Thus, the curve, even with rigs down and price down. So it's dynamic. Most people who report on energy things don't really express the dynamicism of this. I don't know if that's a word. Okay. Price, cost, technology, policy, politics, and demand all drive these resources. Crude oil has done the same thing. Fracking, half of the oil in the United States now comes from hydraulically fractured wells. Half. And look at the production curve. Would anybody have said you would have gone from 5 million barrels a day to 10 in a decade in this country? No. Okay. Let's take a look at U.S. production of oil, going way back to 1859, discovered in Titusville. Put that production curve we just looked at on there. Put a big green line on the edge of it, get rid of the nasty data. There it is, you know. You heard about peak oil? A little more quiet. Now they've switched to peak demand instead of peak supply. Probably the right approach. We could call it Twin Peaks. I don't know. You pick your own name for this stuff. The world hasn't followed this yet. But where do you find oil and gas? Those of you in the oil and gas business, where do you find oil and gas? where it's been found before. These are just the source rocks. Where are we going to find more oil and gas regionally in the world? Russia, the Middle East, where the source rocks are mature. They have piles of it. Why don't they want to produce it yet? It's more expensive. I want to ship the cheap stuff. In fact, they're funding anti-fracking propaganda. Go check out the films that you make out here in California. And who paid for them? It's really fun, actually, to track that and see what we're digesting about some of this stuff and why. It's just business. Let's sell the cheap stuff before we produce the little more expensive stuff. Quietly, it's happening, though, already. So here's our mix, the U.S. energy mix. Look at what's happened in the last decade, and right there on the right end with oil and natural gas and growth in renewables, fracking, you've seen production of energy go up as high as it's ever been in the country. And as a result, our imports have gone down by half, mostly still liquids. It's a pretty interesting story. You won't read this in the Times. You won't read this story. Okay. Why? It doesn't follow the dialogue. Okay. Now, if we had continued to consume in the 70s at the rate we were, 0.5% below GDP growth when Jimmy Carter was president, that's the red line. That would be growth in energy consumption unconstrained, truly business as usual demand. And I look at demand, demand, demand. But instead, there's this giant gap between what we're consuming and what it would have been. That's efficiency. Better mileage, better lights, better insulation. We can do better, but it's a huge amount of energy that hasn't been consumed. In fact, if you look at that now, you can see that we were flat the last 25 years in the U.S., flat on demand even though GDP grew. So where's the oil coming from in the world? Look at these countries, Saudi, China, Russia. They continue to grow their production. The Middle East, OPEC, particularly Saudi, announced when they were getting worried about hydraulic fracturing that they were going to increase production. Remember that back about 3 years ago? And what did it do to price? Here's their production of Saudi. There's price. It plummeted. With 500,000 barrels a day increased, now about 1 million, it plummeted. We've always kind of said, yeah, gee, surprising that 500,000, 1 million barrels a day can do that to price. Well, what was going on in the U.S. at that time? Here. We grew 5.5 million barrels a day in production to go from 5 to 10. And the price stayed. 500,000 barrels a year increase. It wasn't doing anything to price until OPEC announced. So how much is that structural? How much is speculation? You decide. I'd hate to be an energy price forecaster. But it's good work. They're never right and they always get paid, so it's great, you know. But it's brutal. It's human behavior. Where did it come from? Bakken, Eagle Ford, and now the latest player is the Permian Basin. That's the blue curve, and look what's going on out there in the Permian. Remarkable. So I was quoted in the Times, you know, sheiks and shales cause this. They're both producing more oil. That's the fundamental driver. And that's what caused a lot of it. And it's a really successful business, isn't it? Aren't you all in the shale business just making money hand over fist? No. Some of you do, but most of you haven't. In fact, the blue shows the 30 independent shale producers' cash flow deficit. Hadn't been that great. Some get in at the right time in the right place, sell, make money. The next inherit at a different price point. Price goes down, a lot go out of business, M&As. 350,000 people lost their jobs in the world over the last 4 years since OPEC announced and price plummeted. These are big numbers. Here's the non-tight oil peer group, with the yellow line being cash flow positive. And here's the 5 major shale oil producers just starting to get to maybe profitable in the aggregate. So no, it's a risky business. Kind of like the oil and gas business. It's always been. A lot of people don't make much money, contrary to what you would read about obscene profits and excess profits and all this stuff. It's a tight margin, high expense, high risk business. to deliver at scale that much energy. How about Europe? Have they done this like the US has? What do you think? Natural gas and nuclear grown in Europe, coal down. This was just rich. I was on the bicycle this morning. COP is going on in Germany. I can't remember which number it is. They meet so often. And it says a global 100% renewable electricity system is achievable today at every hour of every day in the year. This is from this morning. At less cost than a legacy system based primarily on fossil nuclear energy, according to a modeling study released this morning at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Germany. And it was written by, quote, "There's no reason to invest one more dollar in fossil nuclear power," said Hans Josef Fell, president of the Berlin-based Energy Watch Group, which released the study. Well, how's Germany doing? Gee, they've consumed the same amount of coal for the last 6 years. They're taking imports, physical delivery from the US of coal from the powder to mix with their lignite to provide electricity to back up the solar and wind. Storage is a big challenge. Scalable, affordable, reliable. These aren't trivial at scale. Okay? I mean, the CO2 result of that little delivery of coal on trains to diesel-fired barges back on trains to Germany is not very good, if that's the goal. Intentions are, but let's look at outcomes. Intentions are great. Don't judge them. Let's look at outcomes and adapt and learn as we go forward. In fact, the gate Germany put up for CO2 is about as effective as this one so far. It's called Energiewende. It's their energy policy. And I say the same thing in Europe. You know, I like data. I like outcomes. In fact, a lot of the rest of Europe follow Germany. So this is coal in Europe. The only ones coming down are good old UK and a couple others. So actually coal generation has come down some in Europe. As this has happened, what's happened to natural gas? Well, in Germany, in the UK, it's gone back up. As they've decreased their coal, they're increasing their gas. Why? Because none of them are doing much in nuclear, except France. So for base load, coal, nuclear, natural gas, those are the big three. Here's the rest of Europe increasing natural gas, and you can see the coal from the plot before. Coal up, natural gas down, vice versa. Overall decreasing a little bit as renewables grow slowly. How about the Asia Pacific? Same scale, horizontal and vertical. And the gray is coal. Why? Why so much coal? Well, it's cheap, it's affordable, it's available, and it's reliable. It is growing their economy, and it's lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Well, it's kind of hard to argue with that, you know? Kern County, you can teach the world the vital importance of a balanced energy portfolio. And you have it here. You have all of these things here, except nukes. I don't think you have any nuclear. Do you have a nuclear reactor? One? Oh, perfect. And you're doing storage even. It's ideal. You are a microcosm for what the world looks like. Environmental impact. Here you are. Remember that? Probably not, but your grandparents might. Coast of California. Who knew there was fracking back then? You remember everything's fracking. I wouldn't have wanted to be there, but I guess these folks still managed to procreate somehow. Here we all are. So nonetheless, fracking is considered by the public in the US and Western Europe a really mostly bad thing. And here it is. Here's the frack truck. It's headed to the rig hauling frack fluids. Pretty low bridge. It's out here in California. And things are about to get ugly for the people in the valley, you know. It's so that's fracking. There are impacts from hydraulic fracturing. There are impacts, environmental impacts from the whole oil and gas business. It's a massive industry. You got to mine proppant sand off with water or can manufacture it at scale. And down near the bottom, I'm showing technologies that are coming that are improving the environmental impacts. The rig site itself, there's noise, there's dust, there's lights, there's rigs. There are more increased deaths from truck drivers, et cetera, around the rig site, for sure. Bigger operations. The well pad produces liquids. And so there was gas flaring going on for a while because there was no delivery systems for it. You know, these are environmental things. They're mostly local, not systemic. And then treat and dispose all this fluid. We got big studies going on now. Oklahoma, where I just was yesterday, has passed California a number of earthquakes. Now it's coming down again, but not a record they wanted, I don't think. And most of theirs aren't natural. Texas has our own. And that comes from disposal fluids being put down in wells and disposal wells, near faults oriented correctly at volumes that cause the pressure to change, and they move earlier than they would have. Not a lot. We have 7,500 disposal wells in Texas. About a dozen are potentially affiliated with this. And then finally, the completion and production itself. And every picture you ever see makes it look like the horizontal well is just below your house. This one too. All right? You have to show it. These aren't to scale. Let's put them to scale. Here we go. Vertical scale is now correct. The surface goes away. And here's your 500-foot frac. And let's look at real data. This is the Barnett. On the left are the deeper wells and the microseismicity, bigger than the actual hydraulically fractured zone, and the depth of freshwater aquifer up top into the shallowest on the right. Now, if you put a frac well right under the aquifer, yeah, you could crack into it, but most of this is rock, okay? Look at the tallest building in the world. To get a feeling for scale, let's just put one of your favorites here on top. Tom Cruise, sitting on the building. So solid rock between Tom and the earth, and put him for scale kind of where he belongs, and shrink the building down to scale, the shallowest wells and the aquifer. So some of these things that have been put into so-called documentaries, which really have been shown to be mostly fiction, but very powerful nonetheless. A lot of films are that way. We don't like facts as much anymore. We don't read really anymore. So we watch these videos and we believe them. Okay. That really isn't going on very often, if at all. But I've showed you the kinds of things that do happen around large oil and gas activities. So it's balance. There's these risks, and I participated last year in a pretty intensive shale governance forum over several sessions. And there's benefits, and you wobble back and forth between these things, but the risks on the bad energy seem to get amplified in the public's mind and their eye. All these risks, it's scary. The public is scared. They feel like this, they're in the running of the bulls. This is actually the winner of the last photo taken contest. And here's the runner-up, same contest, last photo taken. I love that picture. All right. So whatever happened to bridge building? Research and technology, education, communication about these things to make sure we understand what the real risks are, what the real benefits are, so we can move forward in a reasonable fashion. Remember this picture? Look to the right, fossil fuels, 86%, they produce carbon dioxide. The increase in CO2 to the atmosphere has increased a lot over the last 50 years. In North America and Europe, it hasn't. Did you know that? For 40 years, it's been essentially flat. Who would have known? You didn't read it in the Times. I love this. You have these out here at the restaurants, the little heaters with a propane tank under them, keep you warm when you're sitting outside. It's beautiful. Energy efficiency, burning fossil fuels. This one's in Aspen. I took this picture. Love Aspen. It's gorgeous. But let's just zoom in and see what Aspen thinks. Isn't it great? And as I was taking this picture, a Maserati drove by and honked at me. You know. Remember, most people don't know how electricity is made and where gasoline comes from. I see a lot of faces out here that are going, oh man, I like this data, but I'm not sure I like this guy. Here we go. North America, et cetera. So where are the increases? How about Asia? And then the developing world is just getting started, aren't they? Here they are. But that red has started to develop. Remember where they get their energy? Coal. Now let's just blame China. I was just over there a month ago. China's bad, they're producing all the CO2. Is it really a production challenge? To me, it's a consumption challenge. Anybody in the room not wearing at least something made in China? Who demands the products? Cheap, reliable, there for us. We do. Don't blame Asia. They just make the products. Let's look at, as consumers, that's where we have to start to think about reducing some of these things. And speaking of consumption, this is taken in China. It could be, yeah, you're thinking, yeah, it's here. You know, actually, it's Austin now, Houston. Auto sales in developing nations, rolling 12-month average. Brazil fell off a lot. Brazil has got some challenges. These follow the economy. You can see Russia. Mexico's growing. Here comes India. All right, a couple million, almost 3 million cars a year now. Now let's go to the developed nations, and there's India. And where's the rest? USA, EU, Japan, and see the recession impact? Different scale, right? Where's China? Right here. A decade ago, 5 million. Today, 27 million. What recession? And these are gasoline and diesel. Okay? How long does your car last? When you sell it for your plug-in hybrid, does you just throw it away? Or does somebody buy it and keep driving it? Aren't they all going to be electric? We've heard that. That's what Elon says, your boy. You know, they'll all be electric. Well, electric cars are growing exponentially. Everything grows exponentially if it succeeds. Then it goes linear, then it rolls over. China in red, the US in green. It's phenomenal. How many cars? 1.2% of the global fleet so far, close to 2% this year. Don't have the actual numbers yet, which is great. 1 million cars. It's a good start. What about the future? Here's some forecasts of cumulative electric vehicles starting at 2020 out to 2040. Bloomberg said it's going to be, in 2016, they said 400, and 2017, a year later, they made it 530. I don't quite know what changes in a year, except the forecast. And here comes OPEC. I'm going to keep the big one, by the way. Here comes OPEC. They said, no. It'll be just 40 million. Wait a minute. Maybe 300. Okay, a year later. And let's keep the big one. Here comes Exxon. They said, no. 70, oh wait, maybe 90 or 100. Keep the big one. So that's pretty tight. You know, I didn't have any accurate numbers, so I just made this one up. Studies have shown accurate numbers aren't any more useful than the ones you make up. How many studies showed that? 87. It's perfect. So we'll come back to our accurate forecasts and ask ourselves, if we wanted to make 10% of the vehicle fleet in the world electric, there's 1.2 billion cars in the world, and it's growing. It would take 120 million cars. So 120 million cars, batteries for each of those. Actually, it's not a battery. It's 3,000 to 7,000 lithium-ion batteries the size of my finger in a battery pack. You'd have to average 10 million batteries a year. We aren't doing that now, so you'd have to grow toward more than that. Let's slide over to Exxon's forecast and say, well, if you need it by 2041, 5 million a year. What are we doing today? There's the big battery manufacturing folks, and they produce 1 million. About. I just did math. I didn't actually write them and ask them. I know 50 gigawatt hours per year, and I did an EV battery at 50 kilowatt hours a year, and you get 1 million. Okay. Now, the forecast for 2020 shows those growing tremendously, including a gigafactory. Elon Musk is one clever guy. I mean, these are cool names. A gigafactory. A giant chemical manufacturing plant. Okay. Refinery, no. Okay, so that's big numbers. What would that be? 150 gigawatt, if you add up all the red, that's 3 million a year. And we still need to get to 5 for Exxon and 10 for Bloomberg. All right, I showed you the fracking data. Let's look at the battery and renewable data. You have to mine and process this stuff. The metals and the chemicals and the rare earths come from somewhere. The earth. The economists call this green mining. It's rich. If it goes to batteries, it's green mining. Got to manufacture them. You got to build the transmission lines. In Texas, we built 5 big 345 kV power line systems. You have to have the battery factories. You got to build the farms, which is land, a lot of land. You can use it under solar, under wind. It's harder under solar collectors because it covers it. And then you have to do something with them because they do wear out. Where do they get disposed? What's the landfill? And we call this green. And I understand why for atmospheric reasons, but I like land, air, and sea. I want to look at all the environmental challenges of going to scale so that we're not naive and look back 25 years later and said, now look what we've left our kids. An earth that has been mined. Kern County can teach the world how to manage the environmental impacts and benefits of all forms of energy at scale. You can do this. Very few can. Let's talk about the 3 E's. Have some fun. Color-coded by how we voted in 2012 by state. All the states, population against energy consumption. The more people, the more you consume. Now, if you're Texas, you consume even more, okay, than the rest of the country per capita. And we're trying. Now, maybe there's a little China syndrome here. We produce a lot of stuff and we send it places like here, okay, just like China does, but we could do better. Keep going. So more people equal more energy consumption with no political split. Here we go. How about population against GSP, the economy of each state? Pretty tight. More people, a bigger economy. Right on a line, no political split. And let's close the circle. The economy against energy consumption. There's a slight political split, barely, but basically, again, the bigger the economy, the more energy you consume here. And Texas is higher up. How about for emissions? This is as close as it gets. The R-squareds on here are 0.9 something. Energy consumption, the more you consume, the more CO2 you emit because of the mix, okay? And Texas is on the far right. And there's California. I've labeled the big states. There are 3 kinds of people in the world. Those who are good at math and those who aren't, okay? So let's talk about the Clean Power Plan in a way that maybe you've not heard. These are the emissions from the big fuels in the country today. Coal, 2/3, natural gas, 1/3, everything else, not much. Remember the mix? We're about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 generating now. Here's the CO2 emissions. In 2015, when the power plan was proposed, post-Paris, we were emitting about 1,900 million metric tons of CO2 from power gen. In 2005, we were emitting 2,400. Why did I pick 2005? Come on, energy-educated people. Why 2005? How many are passionate about the Clean Power Plan? Don't be shy. Nobody? So why did we pick 2005? That's the base year for the Clean Power Plan. That's the year we're going to compare to. Why? Well, it's the highest producing year, tied with 2007. So we were going to come down from there to 2030 with a 32% reduction to 1,600 million metric tons. That was the goal of the Clean Power Plan. In fact, we were on a trend to go lower than that, 1,400, without it. I like outcomes. I don't try not to judge intentions. We were on a trend to go lower. We were already 2/3 of the way there to the goals when it was proposed. Did you know that? How hard to get the last third, and we're already trending there, but we can pat ourselves on the back and say, nice job. We did it. Shale gas, renewables, coal policy, those were already driving it lower and still are. So why do it? Here's our CO2. If you're going to impose a plan and reduce CO2 emissions, I would think to be simple, you just say the biggest emitters, Texas, has to do the most, and everybody else a little less, until we get some wedge of CO2 emissions out of this. Seems logical to me, but I'm kind of a simple-minded thinker. It's not what we did. We said, there's the targets. Every state, I plotted them. Wait a minute, now there's a political split. Who has to reduce a lot more? The red states. Who has to reduce less? The blue states. I'm sure this wasn't part of the design. It just is an outcome. And look at these 4 states right there with Florida. Ready? 2016 vote happened. What happened? 6 states flipped, and those are them. And now the wedge is even bigger. Folks, when we start thinking about national policy, including the Paris Accords, which had some seriously political approaches to accomplishing it, including wealth redistribution and other things that are political approaches, you're going to get political fights. No kidding. And when you do that, people are going to go, wait a minute. Okay? Now, so, you know, the red states aren't real bright, but we probably know which end of the chainsaw we're pulling on sometimes. All right. Energy. You're even laughing. This is great. I was trying to get you to laugh this whole time. No, you right here. No, don't look back. I'm looking right at you. Energy, the environment, and the economy. It's right here. Right? They overlap. They're intricately linked. It's the 3 E's. What is it really? Academia and NGOs, the economy, governments, energy, the industry, working together, ideally, to try to address some of these things. Now, yeah, you can have the baby drill crowd in energy. Great. Brilliant. You know. Equally brilliant. Keep it in the ground. You have senators proposing this. Academics, fully renewable by. You just saw one this morning. Okay? What is it really? Academia, research, regulation, markets. We're trying to bring these things together with legal, social, and political systems. They're all interactive. It's complicated. That's why you're here. It's not easy, but we better work together on this if we're going to start to solve things. I love that space. I call it the radical middle. I've published on it. Why? It's radical. Why? There's nobody there. You know, it's just lonely. Please come compromise. Admit you're wrong. Listen. Read. If we pull this off, we'll have secure energy. At least we'll have the chance for secure energy here, California, the US, and globally. Kern County can teach the world why it's critical to engage in the radical middle. You're doing it. We're here in this room. You're doing it. Finally, the power of energy. This is the population of the world. It's growing out toward 10, 11 billion, a UN forecast. Remember, our energy consumption, it's not magic. It follows the trace. It's accelerating a little bit. Africa and Asia represent 4 out of 5 people in the world today in population. And Africa is proposed to double from 1 to 2 billion over the next 40 to 50 years. The world could be 100% wind, wave, and solar by 2030, this study said, if just for political will. Really? Let's see what that would look like. There it is. I couldn't get it low enough. I left a few fossil fuels in, but there it is. Now that would be an interesting energy supply curve. Folks, I'm sorry, but I think if you actually think that could happen, if just for political will, you probably need this sign. Caution, fire is hot. Do not breathe under the water. Yeah. Here it is by population. 4 out of 5, but they only consume 40% of the energy today in the world because they're just starting to grow. The rest of us consume the rest of it. Per capita GDP against per capita electricity consumption. Ready? By nation, the developed nations over 25 years, largely flat. We continue to grow economically, consume flat per capita, can come down, it's high. The developing nations are just starting up this curve, okay? Electricity against GDP. Look in the lower left corner. Who do we find? A third of the world, India and China. China leading, India following, just getting started. And then keep looking in the lower left. There's some more nations, Niger, Chad, Haiti. 1.2 billion people without any electricity today. It's down to about 800 million, depending on what you read. Let's just call it 3 United States with no electricity in the world today. That's wrong, okay? So there's nothing that's good or right about that. We visited a lot of them. We made a film called Switch. It's online. You can view it for free. We've passed 15 million viewers. We're in thousands of universities, K through 12 now, about this global energy scene. It's been awarded by environmental groups, energy groups, et cetera, because it's objective. Just went around and looked at it all. What did we miss? We missed 3 billion people unintentionally. So we're making another film called Switch On. I'd give my time to this, but we make it with your investments and provide what I'm showing you to the world so they can educate. What do the 3 billion people there want to do? They want to do what we've done, right? Hopefully not as high, more efficient, but nothing should preclude that from happening. So we formed this Switch Energy Alliance, and I don't know if I have control up here to actually play this little video or not. Can you rip that for me?
Energy powers the modern world. Everywhere we live, everywhere we go. Everything we do depends on energy. I'm Scott Tinker, and for 15 years I've been searching for the truth about our energy transition. And the only way to find it was to go out and get it.
Everywhere you can see is turbines.
I traveled the globe to discover what it would take to go from the energy that built our world to the energy that will shape our future. And that film, Switch, has now reached 15 million viewers worldwide and impacted countless others. But there's another huge challenge in energy that we hardly looked into.
We have 600 million people in this country without access to electricity. Can you imagine? That's 2 United States.
And that's just in India. There are 3 billion people around the world living with little or no energy. Providing energy at the scale needed will require new technology and new ideas from every sector of the energy industry. What will it really take to add power to half the planet? In Switch On, I'm going to find out, starting in Colombia. The Arhuaco people asked us to help them power their villages.
And if you have a need for electricity in a way that we could help you, we would like to learn that.
We'll tell the story of energy development in the most human way, by being part of the solution. You can be part of the solution too. Join the Switch Energy Alliance. Help us power the people and help educate the world on energy.
If you look at electricity and poverty, this is income, severe poverty across the bottom against electrification rate. $3 a day. South America, the size of the circle related to population, 90% electrified, 10 to 20% in poverty. When you put in Asia, the numbers get very big. Less electrification, more poverty, and finally Africa. Energy and poverty are related. If you have electricity, it gives you the chance to start to lift yourself out of poverty. We went to this little village in Ecuador where they have 95% electrification rate in Ecuador. Followed the line here to this village. You saw it in the clip. They're still cooking with wood in dirt floors and no walls. We went into the bedroom. You can see the fluorescent bulb up top and that wire hanging there. That's electricity. It didn't work. The little girl we met slept with her father and mother in that bed with no mattress, open air again. This is severe poverty. She tied a thing on my wrist, which I don't usually wear, but I won't take that one off. Okay. Severe poverty with electricity. Electricity doesn't end poverty. Energy doesn't, but poverty can't be ended without energy. Our world at night, composite satellite photo. Remember these? You can see where the electricity is. Let's scale them. Now you can see why the electricity is. Those with energy have it. There are people that want to keep it in the ground. Let's show what that looks like. There's the same spheres with no fossil fuels. 86% gone. Let's darken those lights, 86%. And I don't judge the intentions, but I don't want to keep them in poverty. Turn the lights back on. In fact, let's lift them from poverty. I don't think climate and poverty are mutually exclusive. There are solutions here that can be done that are both. This is my friend, Matt. Okay, it's crappy Photoshop. But he talks a lot about energy, passionate about it. Here's my friend Leo. Leo speaks to the UN floor, passionate about energy. And here's Mark. He's a big voice in it too, right? In fact, if Leo, Matt, and Mark were here today, this room would be standing room only if they were talking about energy. It'd be like me talking about filmmaking because I made one. This is actually my friend Rex. And this is actually my friend Ernie, Secretary of Energy under Obama. This is actually my friend Rick. The reason I show you these is because people are swayed by emotions, not data and facts. The emotional leaders were the first figures. These are the folks trying to figure this out. And I'm not saying they've got it, not bragging on them. I know them, work with them, but they're trying to solve these things as you are as we move forward. And they're huge issues, aren't they? Population, water, healthcare, education, housing, hunger, immigration, the status of women in the world today, unemployment, crime. All of these things are underpinned by energy. In fact, the global issues, these underpin poverty, and they really inhibit freedom. Why is there immigration? Because there's no hope or opportunity where you are today. It's time to power the people. It's time that we stepped up to the plate and do what we need to do. Provide energy to the world. Some of that will be renewable, like with our friends in Colombia. There's no grid. There are no roads. You saw the roads. There are no pipelines. It's going to be distributed renewable energy. Some of it won't Dense energy matters. Big grids matter. Cities are becoming more and more dense, more efficient. It's this mix that is vital to this world. Kern County can teach the world the transformational power of energy. What can you teach the world? The vital importance of a balanced portfolio. You can teach the world how to manage environmental impacts and benefits of all forms of energy. Why it's critical to engage in the radical middle and the transformational power of energy. And you can help folks understand where oil comes from and how electricity is made. You can help marginalize the good and the bad energy dialogue. End that. It's not productive. It allows us to do things around the rational fringes instead of the and you can lead an honest future energy conversation. You can lead that. And I'd love to work with you to do that. If nobody's done it recently, I want to thank you for what you do. My guess is in the energy world, when you're asked on an airplane, what do? You say, oh, I'm just... Sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm in the energy business, and I try to lift the world out of poverty. What do you do? It's a pretty good start. So thanks for what you do. I got to catch my corporate jet back to good old Texas, but I really appreciate being here. Thank you.
Well, that's a lot of information to digest. So you guys are going to have all afternoon to chew on this, the macro issues that really affect the world. And again, as Scott said, he's a great cheerleader for the energy independence that we've created in our own community, all kinds, that balance, and how we should be getting folks from around the world coming to Kern County. I want to thank Tamara for an amazing job as the leader. Thank you. Especially keeping me on time. Michelle Lidgett, thank you. Cheryl Scott and Melinda Brown. It's a great team effort, and we thank our own board, exec committee, and all the sponsors today and attendees, and best of luck with the rest of your day. Have a good one. Safe travels.